my adventures in inner space took an unexpected turn that subsequently left nothing the same. Unknown to me, Phase 1 was over and Phase 2 was about to begin. Without forewarning, I was set up to begin a battery of exams that would determine the quality of my being. How evolved an entity was I? How much had I learned and grown with the help of my mentors? What was the limit of my understanding? The questions, or more accurately situations, presented me with multiple choices that became progressively more difficult. The first question was mostly verbal. Would you rather have this treasure I got a picture or learn something new? The answer was obvious: knowledge was far more valuable than goods. It was so blatantly obvious in fact that I decided to make a joke. Just gimme the loot, I said sarcastically in my best gangster voice. I can always learn something new on my own. At the time, I did not realize that this was the first question on a long and especially serious test. My world exploded. BZZZZZT. Wrong. I was instantly transported to an entirely different place. He failed the first question. He is not ready. I heard someone exclaim with surprise and disappointment. Send him back. Someone else shouted, he failed the test. Test? I said, feeling a little like Alice at the Queen's castle. I didn't know this was a test. I was joking. I knew the answer. I thought someone was playing around with me making up goofy choices, so I was being goofy to get them back. The panel of judges that were to administer and evaluate my exam slipped back in time, inspected my mind for my true motivations. They evidently weren't expecting a smart aleck. My advocates approached the bench vouching for my readiness. I was relieved that somebody was taking my side. I did not know who they were, but I was glad they were there. The tone had suddenly become heavy, as if something terribly important was going on. 2 judges said failed was failed, send him home, while the other 3 said continue the test, let us see what he can do. A higher level judge was consulted. It was decided. I was to be given a second chance. It was obvious there was some serious hardball politics involved that I did not understand. The tension was thick as tar. These judges did not like each other and there was a strong competitive hostility between the 2 groups. I knew this was very serious business, but I didn't know what I was doing in the middle of it. It was clear that whatever was going on was important to me and important to others for reasons I did not understand. I was thankful for the chance to show what I actually knew. My advocates, who had evidently been working with me for a long time to get me ready for this first test, were almost apoplectic. Their relief at my second chance was immense, but they remained worried. It was as if their most important plans, careers, and reputations hung in the balance, and there I was, a somewhat unpredictable embodied bone-headed human. Instantly, I was back in test space. The first question was repeated. It was a precise replay of what I had previously experienced. I surmised that this was a fixed or standardized set of questions and that they had to restart the series from the beginning, even though the first question and its answer had been revealed. Question after question, situation after situation, was put before me. I evidently did well, because when you get one wrong, it's over. There were problems that tested ego and desire with sexual enticements, some of which were bizarre. There were choices between helping others and pursuing your personal path. They played to my emotions and ego, tried to instill fear, and probed how well I truly understood love. Eventually, I was clueless as to how to approach the problem. I went with my best guess and the test abruptly ended. I was back in my body, turning into a young kid again, though my mental space retained its adult nature while in the altered state. Geez, I thought, what was that about? As a kid, I often retained a clear memory of what happened, for a short while at least. But, I did not relate to it. At least 5 times since then I have been hauled in front of panels of judges because of my unpredictable, quirky human nature. Thus far, I have prevailed. I must, as they say, have a rap sheet a mile long. Some 23 years later, the event that had jogged this childhood memory occurred. I was at Bob's house one weekend afternoon when he began to comment on a training exercise I had been involved in the night before. Regular training sessions designed to develop my effectiveness within NPMR began again in earnest shortly after I resumed sentience within the larger reality. Bob had been in the audience watching my performance. He was telling me about what I had done. I was surprised, not that he could know, but because usually he was not involved in my hoops. He knew every move I made and started kidding me about a show-off display I had performed at the successful end of a particularly difficult series, the way football players sometimes dance in the end zone. We were laughing about it, when he told me about an especially difficult test he himself had recently been given. He started to describe it. After he described the third test in this long series, I stopped him. He knew something was up. Now it was my opportunity to puzzle him. My experiences of 23 years ago had come flooding back in a gushing torrent as he described the first 3 tests. I made him wait until I had collected my thoughts. I told him what the 4th test was. His jaw dropped. I had never seen Bob speechless before. I described the 5th test. He was dumbfounded. We went through the rest of the test, alternating who would give the description of the presented problems. Oddly enough, we had bombed out at the same place but with different answers. Evidently neither one was right, or that was the last question. Without a doubt, that was a standardized test. Since that time I have run into several others who have experienced some sequence of events while in NPMR that were identical in form, function, and content to events I experienced. Back to the early 1950s. Immediately after that first big test, I was put in regular training classes. Every night for most of a year I was run through situations, given jobs to do, and further tested by my trainers. I was never told what I was being trained for. I worked hard. After that first major evaluation almost turned catastrophic, I was serious. It was more work than fun. I was learning to control my mind, to manipulate non-physical energy, to make the right choices for the right reasons, to think fast, and act fast. I was learning to follow directions and to break old PMR conceptual habits. I was becoming effective and efficient in NPMR. I was learning focus and control. Eventually, after much practice, I began to feel competent and strong, like an athlete ready to walk into the arena. One night there was no more training. I would not resume the effort until some 20 years later, but I didn't know that then. 14 This kid is weird enough. I did not know it, but my learning time in the non-physical was about to come to an end for a long time. My mind would typically shift into adult mode as I drifted on the boundary between awake and asleep. It had been a week or more since my instructors had been by to take me to class, and for some reason I had not gone on my own. It was time to get back to it. I began to slip out of body, unassisted by my instructors. Now it was easy. I wondered where my teachers were. Why hadn't they come? Oh well, this will be fun, I thought with great anticipation. I paused for a moment. Where should I go? What should I do? My training had been highly structured. I wasn't used to this much freedom. Perhaps they want to see what I will do on my own, I thought. I felt that they were probably watching. Rather suddenly, someone stopped me cold in my tracks, forcefully shoving me back into my body. Hey, I said, what are you doing? You can't do that to me. Yes I can, the reply came back in a firm authoritative tone. In fact, he continued, I have been instructed to seal off this passage. You will no longer be allowed to exit your body. If this is a test, I don't get it, I thought to myself as I struggled to find the correct response. It was not a test. There were 2 of them, but only one spoke. Workers sent to close and seal the door on my experiences in NPMR. Are you sure you have the right person? I challenged. This must be some mistake. I waited while he checked out that possibility. No mistake, he said, looking at his work order, you are the one. But why? I pleaded. You are a young kid, aren't you? He said. Yes, but just my body, I replied. That has never been a problem before. You have completed what you were doing, he said matter-of-factly, and now they don't want you to grow up too weird. You know what I mean. You need to grow up like a normal kid, develop a healthy personality. Too much of this other world experience would make you strange and not fit comfortably into the world you will grow up in. I can handle it, I protested. I haven't had any problems so far. You have no choice, he said emphatically. Trust me. It may be easy now because you are only in one reality at a time, but as you get older, it would become a problem for you to juggle multiple realities simultaneously. I did trust him, and I intuitively knew that he was right. I also had no choice. He was much more powerful and knowledgeable than I was. I knew I could not slip thoughts into his mind. I didn't try. Will I ever be allowed to get back out again? Will you ever unseal this door? I asked hopefully. I don't know, he said flatly as if it were none of his business. Can you find out for me? I pleaded. Please look and see. I don't think they were supposed to do this sort of thing, but I must have sounded desperate and sad. Neither worker said anything, but they both looked far away into the distance. It was a long and intense look. Suddenly, they both gave a loud gasp as if they were simultaneously surprised and shocked. They were momentarily stunned, and remained quiet for a few seconds. What is it? I asked. What do you see? I strained to see the picture that was in their minds, but could not. Will I ever get through this door again? Tell me, please. Both workers now had the demeanor of someone who has inadvertently blundered into something they were not supposed to know about. Both had become tightly focused on what they were doing and were now non-communicative and in a hurry. They glanced at each other with concern. I could sense that they were more than a little worried. I could feel their feelings and could pick up a few surface thoughts, but the startling events they had witnessed were securely and purposely unavailable. How could the information they had inadvertently found out about my future put them in a jam? I was dumbfounded. My concern and overall puzzlement was growing rapidly. They had a sense of impending personal jeopardy. After some quick discussion, they briefed higher authority on the situation. A few others who were somehow connected were brought in. Security was tight. Decisions were made quickly. A plan B was set into motion and everyone but the two workers immediately disappeared. The problem was not that the two workers had broken a rule by looking ahead. For me that was a relatively small issue that could be, and was, quickly forgiven. The problem was that now they knew something that they were not supposed to know. I was perplexed, and could not even make a wild guess at what was causing all the concern. What did you see? What is the problem? What's going on? I asked the workers in a quiet and serious tone, trying to sound as if I were a team member who had, for some unavoidable reason, just happened to miss the preceding conversation. They took a few seconds to finish what they were doing and then slowly turned toward me, paused, and stared with quizzical amazement for a few moments. They looked at each other for a brief moment, then back at me. Saying nothing, they slammed the door hard. I was shut out. As it turned out, I was not shut out entirely. There were no more out-of-body experiences, to be sure, but I still had friends. In my mind, I could easily communicate telepathically with my guides. I did not call them that, but that was their function. Point 15 With a little bit of help from my friends. How's your love life? I always knew growing up that there were non-physical entities available to help me. They looked after me and I knew it. They were non-physical friends who were older and wiser and knew what was coming. I think that many people have this sense of having helpers. Whether you interpret it as a religious manifestation, God, or guardian angels perhaps, or simply let it exist unnamed within your imagination, seems primarily to be a function of your cultural belief system and temperament. When in need, I intuitively sought out my guides and depended on them. When I did not need them, I forgot about them. Whether I was aware of them or not, they were always with me. They were at times my intuition, my luck, my counselor, my pals, and they made a special effort to keep me alive. Risk and daring had always been two of my favorite playmates and most steady companions. I was not an easy case. Several times in particular, these guides provided detailed information about my future. Both times were in response to questions of relationship that contained strong emotional and intellectual content. Once, at 14 while waiting for the school bus to take me home, I asked in frustration about the possibility of ever having a successful love life. Instead of being amused at my pathetic pubescent condition, they proceeded to lay out the relationship map of the rest of my life. Every significant relationship with pictures and detailed description followed in rapid succession. I repeated it over and over in my mind so that I would not easily forget it. To this day, I remember most of the conversation clearly. Accurate predictions were made that penetrated 20 years into the future. How could they do that? I do not know for sure. I must be an exceptionally predictable person. In particular, they predicted that the final lasting connection significant other would be with a woman who was now only 2 years old. 2, I blurted out, you have got to be kidding. I am paired with some 2-year-old baby. Come on guys, I can't wait that long. This must be a joke. Right? It was no joke. At 14, this was not what I wanted to hear. That is so far away, how can you predict that? I asked. They did not answer. Do I know this baby? I asked. No, they said, she is not in this state. Great, I thought, a monk forever. There will be others before her, they said in consolation. Yeah, sure, but what's the point, they are not the one. I shot back with obvious disappointment. No, they will not be the one, but they are important and necessary, my guides replied with great patience. I heaved a sigh of resignation. They never kidded around and were, as far as I could tell, always right. Arguing with your guides was even more futile than arguing with your mother. I paused and turned inward. I began to remember an experience I'd had a few years earlier, when I was 12. I had sneakily taken a look at the fold-out of the month in a girly magazine at a newsstand while the owner was busy ringing up sales. Being exceedingly impressed with what I had seen, I wondered if I would ever have a woman like that to have and to hold. To my surprise, a reply began to stream into my mind. Yes, I was told, you will have one that looks very much like that one, she will meet all of your desires, my guides added with a hint of amusement. She will really love you, the two of you will be tightly connected. I was given a sense of the quality of the relationship. Wow! I thought. I was excited, the luckiest guy alive, because my guides always knew what they were talking about. They were always sure and confident and never guessed or speculated. When? I asked excitedly, when do I find her? When you are 35 years old, they said flatly. I was totally devastated. Oh man, that's really old, I mean really, really old. Do you have any idea how far it is to 35 when you are only 12? It's forever. I whirred. That's the way it is, they said with no trace of emotion. I had the sense that they were ever so slightly amused at my reaction. As that memory poured into my consciousness, the connection was immediately obvious. That 2-year-old baby and my fold-out princess were one and the same. Interesting, but totally useless, I thought. The immediate romantic future that I was most interested in looked as bleak as ever. Another instance occurred when, at 21, I was about to get married after graduating from college. I was having second thoughts, when a similar experience took place. The future was outlined. Again the one was described and predicted. The problem was, it did not happen to be the person I was about to marry. Yes, I was supposed to get married. Yes, I would have a son. No, it was not going to last forever. But why do it now if this is not the one? I argued, and then continued with, it is not fair to her or the child. The answer came back clear and strong, it is what you are supposed to do, it is part of a larger plan. Marry her. It is the next step for you, and will be the best thing for everyone including her. Everything will work out. I did. It did. Everything they said happened as they said it would, except for a few items at the far end of the given timeline that have either changed their probability of occurrence over the years, which is what I think, or they are still in the queue. In the event you are curious, at the age of 35 I am writing these words in the year 2000. At the age of 55 I began a relationship with the one who is 12 years younger than I was 2 when I was 14. We have 3 children exactly as foretold who adore their big half-brother Eric. Life is good. As you see, it is not exactly true that I had a cold start with TM at the age of 24. Life had been good to me and I had completely forgotten most of what I just told you. To an exceedingly skeptical, young, bone-headed, hard science type who had made a concerted and relatively successful effort to purge his system of all beliefs, and who was naturally wary of anything he could not directly measure, it certainly seemed as if it were an ice-cold start at the time. 16 Here we go again. By the early 70s, that door to NPMR that had been slammed shut 20 years earlier was thrown wide open again. I was back in NPMR with a mission to understand it all from a scientist's perspective this time. By the end of the 70s, Bob and the lab were doing their thing, and I was doing my own thing independently. I had learned that the so-called phenomena or powers, paranormal events, were only an artifact of a path well taken, not the objective or destination. Becoming too enamored of paranormal phenomena can distract you from more important issues and retard or prevent your further development. I also learned that the bigger picture was centered on the quality of your consciousness, the evolution of your being, and that my experience could be scientifically explained. Eventually, it became apparent that the rate of learning accelerates. The more you know, the faster you learn. Up to 1980 I was on the launch pad, getting ready, learning, training. Then things really took off. The pace has never slowed and my interest and dedication have never waned. More data points continue to pour in today. From another point of view, nothing exceptionally strange happened. Many children around the age of 5 to 7 have unusual experiences in their dreams. I was able to later remember mine and understand them within a larger context. Likewise, many people have non-physical guides or advisors. In our culture, this sometimes occurs within a religious paradigm. I was given an unusual opportunity to work in a fascinating field with a good teacher, and I took full advantage of it by working hard and being dedicated and conscientious in my effort. That was simply good fortune or good planning, being in the right place at the right time with the right credentials, the right interests, and the right attitude. What I learned was more by virtue of hard work and a focused interest than by anything fantastic, amazing, or strange. There was no magic, no bump on the head, no aliens from outer space, no near-death experience, and I did not find deep mystical secrets hidden in a golden urn buried under the rubble of an ancient monastery in Tibet. It was good science and dedicated effort applied to an opportunity, that is all. I essentially worked my way to where I am today and I have no regrets. Indeed, I feel extremely lucky to have found the path that I am on. The word strange is a relative word. Anything not mundane must, necessarily, seem strange to those who have not experienced it. Today I work as a physicist in an engineering services company specializing in missile defense research and development, and if you saw me or worked with me you would not think that I was the slightest bit strange. Yet, in another environment, away from the workplace, I help guide the development of a small group of students and other people interested in increasing the quality of their consciousness. I have learned to work harmoniously with the environment I find myself in. Because most of my real work has been focused in the non-physical, it has been easy to maintain a low profile in PMR. I have been strongly encouraged to share some of the results and conclusions of my explorations of the reality we live in. That is what my big toe is about. I hope that by knowing how I came to have the somewhat unusual knowledge and experience that makes this book possible, you will be able to view the unusual concepts you are about to delve into with a broader perspective. Having been faced with the same dilemma of analysis, is this guy nuts, or what? That faces you now, I fully understand your position. There is no easy or satisfactory way to judge the quality of the information upon which this trilogy is based without knowing me personally. Nevertheless, I hope the above account at least helps a little. Those with your own experience will find familiarity in what I have to say. Good luck. I hope you make out as well as I did, or at least learn something useful. Remember, the evidence, as well as the key to understanding, lies within your own experience and nowhere else. Section 2 Mysticism Demystified. The Foundations of Reality. 17 Introduction to Section 2 What we call mystical is relative to the extent of our knowledge and understanding. If some process, phenomena, or conceptualization appears to lie beyond our potential ability to explain it within the context of PMR physical matter reality, we describe it as mystical. Much of what was considered mystical 1,000 years ago is considered science today, and much of what is considered mystical today will be clearly understood by a future science. As our current accumulated objective knowledge reaches its limits and begins to dissolve into the seemingly unknowable, what lies beyond our presumed theoretical reach is defined as mystical. Such presumptions well up from our beliefs about objective reality. Thus, what appears to be mystical or unknowable from the view of Western culture simply reflects Western cultural beliefs and the limited understanding of contemporary science. Consequently, it is a double dose of ignorance, cultural beliefs, and limited scientific knowledge that defines what appears to be beyond our serious consideration. Think about that the next time you roll your eyes and snicker because you universally associate the concept of mystical with ignorance, other people's, not yours, foolishness, and unscientific blather. For an individual, the process is more personal. What may be perceived by an individual to be mystical is relative to the individual's understanding, knowledge, and ignorance. It is our personal beliefs that determine what we consider to be mystical. Whether individuals know little or much about either PMR or NPMR non-physical matter reality, what lies beyond the reach of his or her personal understanding and knowledge may be 1. Interpreted by that individual as mystical, 2. Construed by belief to be something that suits the needs of the individual, 3. Regarded as a temporary ignorance of something theoretically knowable, or 4. Regarded as a permanent ignorance of something theoretically unknowable. An individual's conclusions regarding what lies beyond his objective reach are necessarily belief-based unless, of course, the conclusion is that there can be no conclusions. Nevertheless, most of us embrace a multitude of both culturally given and personally derived belief-based conclusions with a degree of certainty that only a deep bone-level ignorance could sustain. Belief is a conclusion based upon a mystical premise. Scientists might believe that what is unknown must be contained within the PMR data set and follow ordinary objective causality, but that belief or article of faith simply expresses a more accepted form of mysticism. Mysticism that supports our cultural beliefs is accepted as obvious fact. By definition, such a belief necessarily appears to be the most reasonable assumption that a rational person within that culture can make. This is how ordinary mysticism expressed as cultural and personal belief is transmuted into an unquestioned philosophical foundation. We see that the objective causality of Western materialism must necessarily spring from a foundation of mystical assumption. Voila! Faith becomes science, or at least an integral part of the scientific attitude. The results of this illogical transformation continue in chain reaction. Next, science becomes truth, or at least the sole judge of truth, and is given the job of defining reality. Thus, from the Western perspective, the world of ideas and concepts bifurcates, with science and truth on the one hand and philosophy and conjecture on the other. Though science is important because it produces a marvelous array of useful physical products, philosophy is marginalized because it produces nothing but useless arguments. In the final act of this farce, we see that science, unable to overcome the barrier of its ancient, no longer useful, faith-based paradigms, becomes imprisoned by the limitations of its core beliefs. As science struggles with its self-induced myopia, philosophy tries in vain to mimic science's illusion of objectivity in order to appear relevant. Does this not remind you of some preposterously convoluted French farce? Ah, but wait, the action isn't over there is a surprise ending. However, you will have to take this journey with me and my big toe from here to the end of section 6 if you want to discover how this drama plays out. No doubt about it, I am putting you off. Why? Because, if I told you the ending now, before thoroughly discussing some of your current beliefs and paradigms, you would not, could not, get it. I know that you are experienced and brilliant, but that is not the point. Seeing the big picture requires more than intellectual capacity. It also requires transcending ingrained belief systems. That is something that many people are not willing or able to do, at least not quickly or easily, if at all. That is why a trilogy is required instead of a technical paper. Academic papers provide a media for communicating something of value only if one is working within the accepted cultural and scientific belief systems. Consequently, significant new knowledge is typically generated by meticulously taking countless tiny steps of ever-expanding detail towards some specific goal. Digging out details requires a totally different mental process than discovering big-picture paradigms. Today, almost all scientists remain focused on prying details from a reality exclusively circumscribed by traditional scientific belief. Fact is, you will never be able to see the big picture as long as you focus on individual politically correct pixels. Because my big toe must go beyond traditional belief systems to introduce an entirely new understanding of reality, much of this trilogy must necessarily be spent broadening your perspective. Have patience and resist the urge to come to what appear to be obvious conclusions before you have consumed the entire trilogy. Transcending old paradigms and belief systems is as inherently difficult a process to facilitate as it is to undergo. Will my big toe come to the rescue and re-energize this languishing drama of stultified science and marginalized philosophy by dissolving the Gordian knot of limiting belief that condemns both to little more than picking the bones of the past, simply taking the next logical step, or digging ever deeper into the detail of yesterday's discoveries? Can my big toe successfully raise science to the next plateau of understanding while simultaneously returning philosophy to its rightful place, leading the parade of human progress with meaningful and useful insight? Stay tuned. What I hope to accomplish in this section is to develop the basic concepts necessary to support a rational theory of existence, a conceptualization that provides the foundation for a reasonable big picture theory of everything big toe. In the process, I hope to push your mystical edge where knowledge meets ignorance back to a point where the residual unknown has no potential significance and is of no practical interest. A toe that does not reach beyond PMR is only a little toe, little picture theory of everything confined to PMR and limited to a local causality. Can you imagine the elements and limitations of a tiny toe from the perspective of bacteria living in your intestines? Would a seemingly complete and comprehensive from the view of the bacteria tiny toe be concerned with the nuclear fusion taking place within our sun or the density and composition of our atmosphere? No, of course not. These things have no direct significance to the bacteria in your intestines. Although all things that live upon the earth depend on the sun's energy and the composition and density of Earth's atmosphere, the bacteria in your intestine cannot directly experience either. Their tiny toe needs only to describe everything that is potentially knowable by the bacteria. To a given awareness, the practical definition of the word everything means everything knowable, important, meaningful, or significant that can directly interact with that awareness. Thus, what constitutes a comprehensive and complete big toe is relative to your perspective, knowledge, and limitations. That tiny toe would seem complete from the view of the bacteria, even if it neglected to include the money in your bank account, the light bulb in your refrigerator, or the car in your garage. However, these items may indirectly have a profound effect on the current intestinal environment. Money, refrigerators, light bulbs, and automobiles are too far removed, far beyond the practical, functional, or theoretical scope of a bacterium's tiny toe to be comprehended by the bacteria, or to be of any direct importance to them. To the bacteria in the intestine, the source of digested food descending from the stomach would seem mystical. The economic, social, and physical circumstances and processes that indirectly result in a particular food being deposited in the stomach would be beyond mystical. The causal mechanisms that drive and order these apparently mystical events and processes are necessarily invisible to even the most brilliant intestinal bacteria. The forces and relationships that govern the growing of wheat as well as the making and marketing of bread falls beyond a bacterium's theoretical ability to imagine, and therefore forever lies beyond the largest reality it can possibly comprehend. Do not be too surprised to find Homo sapiens in a similar situation. This is a difficult pill for many, especially scientists, to swallow. The concept that there may be a natural practical limit to the extent of our knowledge, a limit beyond which our perception cannot penetrate, is based upon the notion that we are only a very small part of a much greater reality. This humbling thought runs counter to the significance and self-importance we humans place upon ourselves. If our experience is limited to a small part of a larger reality, it is only reasonable to assume that beyond the limit of our possible knowing there may well exist a host of phenomena, interactions, relationships, and ordered happenings upon which our reality and existence profoundly depends, but of which we cannot directly perceive. Allowing the outside theoretical possibility that our beloved PMR may be a local reality, a subset of something larger, is the first step toward comprehending a bigger picture. This possibility breaks the conventional paradigm of PMR being all there is and replaces it with a more expansive paradigm that forms a logical superset. The limited little picture concept is fully contained within a more general bigger picture concept. If the larger and more general paradigm provides a better and more concise understanding of the available data as well as produces valuable new knowledge, approaches, and processes, then the more general conceptualization is also a more accurate, productive, and truer representation of the whole. An improved reality paradigm is one that broadens and deepens the available solution space relative to existing data and problems in a way that is practical and useful. It is as easy to understand the limitations of a bacterium's perspective as it is difficult to understand the limitations of our own perspective. That is natural enough. We cannot be aware of what is beyond our awareness. However, we can be open to learning new things, and in the process, expand the scope of our awareness and therefore our reality to its outer limits. At the top level, where any big picture must first be clearly drawn, my big toe will attempt to encompass everything known and knowable. What lies beyond my big toe will remain practically unknowable, forever mystical because of the inherent limits of our vision. Nevertheless, both the mystical and the beyond mystical will be explored as we have some fun with logical extrapolations that reach well beyond our capacity to comprehend. Encompass everything knowable? Derive physics from metaphysics? Explain the paranormal scientifically? No way. Even at the most general theoretical level, that's completely impossible. What's the catch? Is this guy nuts or what? I know the idea of encompassing or bounding everything known and knowable sounds unlikely at this point, as does the rest, but it is not as far-fetched as you may think. My big toe is not presented at such a high level of generality, nor is it so off the wall as to hold little direct scientific or practical value to the real world. No catch, no megalomania, no hypothetical wackiness, no goofy beliefs, just straightforward science that better describes the measured data and provides a wealth of practical results and new understanding that can be applied personally and professionally by scientists and non-scientists alike. By the end of this trilogy you will be able to assess the accuracy of these seemingly impossible, unsubstantiated statements. Until then, open-minded skepticism is the only approach that retains the possibility of success for either of us. Let us begin to explore the outer limits of our reality and see how far we can push back the boundary. We are generally somewhat smarter than bacteria and are theoretically limited only by the capacity of our minds. Unfortunately, we are limited by much more beliefs, pseudo-knowledge, preconceived notions, attitudes, fears, desires, needs, and cultural biases. For this reason, we must talk about some of these first. The biggest picture must cover everything objective, everything subjective, everything normal, and everything paranormal. Mind and matter, consciousness and concrete, all the true data and the facts of existence, the personal as well as the scientific, must be accounted for, compatible with, and contained within this single big toe if it is a comprehensive and correct big toe. If it is only a little toe, or incorrect big toe, it will not support or explain all the data. It is your job to assess the extent to which this big toe explains your experience and knowledge. However, before reaching conclusions, it is important to understand the difference between knowledge and belief. In the chapter after next we will thoroughly explore that subject. To set the stage for that challenging epistemological adventure, we must first take a look at our collective beginning. It is always a good idea to start at the beginning. Let us get started on this strange journey. Oh yes, it will need to be strange or it could not possibly be a correct big toe. Trust me, unless you have invested many years of experience in this area, what you are about to read will greatly challenge the elasticity of your mind. To make things worse, my insistence that this big toe is primarily derived from and based upon carefully evaluated scientific data, rather than theoretical conjecture, will require your sense of my credibility to stretch even further than your mind. Unfortunately, a reader with a simultaneously stretched mind and stretched sense of credibility puts me on thin ice from the beginning, but that is the way it has to be. Such is the nature of this topic, the facts of my experience, and the results of my research. Something less strange or more widely credible would be easier to convey, find a wider audience, and be more acceptable to almost everyone, but it would not be correct. People generally believe that they know almost everything that is knowable, that the final few things to be figured out will constitute small steps compared to the distance already come. For example, scientists toward the end of the 19th century often lamented the obvious fact that everything important in science and technology had been discovered. Little more than a century later, that claim is laughable. By definition, it is clear that you cannot be aware of what you do not know. Yet, we almost always let our egos trick us into believing that we are much less ignorant than we actually are. It is often said there is nothing as outrageous or strange as the truth. The truth of that statement, clearly demonstrated by modern physics, demands an open-minded approach. Hopefully my big toe will stimulate you to consider some important things in an entirely new and beneficial way. Take from it whatever you can. The picture and perspective may be very big and initially the credibility for those who do not know me may be very thin, but if you feel your way through it with your intuition as well as think your way through it with your intellect all the while collecting and applying the data of your experience, it might just make some sense to you. Appreciating and understanding the big picture is always the first step in focusing and directing the effective investment of the resources you have at your command. The point and purpose of this work is to offer an expanded view of reality and of your relationship to that reality that is useful and helpful to you in a direct and practical way. In my big toe, you will find a reality model that provides a unique perspective which can be profitably applied to your professional and personal life. One final caution. Section 2 lays down the conceptual foundation for much of the rest of the trilogy without explaining how these concepts link up later to complete a meaningful pattern. It may be difficult to get a firm grip on some of this material because it is predominantly abstract and may be relatively distant from your common everyday experience. Understanding and validation will accrue slowly as you digest the next 4 sections and bring your own explorations of big truth to bear on the conclusions drawn. Though there are many abstract tunnels to explore in Section 2, there is precious little light to be seen at the end of any of them initially. Nevertheless, a logical approach requires many of the conceptual building blocks to be defined and set out before big toe construction can be initiated. Delay final judgments until these concepts are more fully developed and applied in subsequent sections. If you can hang tough, the method to the madness should become fully apparent by the time you finish Book 3. If my big toe entices those who are open-minded and intrepid explorers to explore the far reaches of their reality on their own, I would be delighted. To be optimally effective, my discovery must lead to your discovery. I must not only help you to objectively understand the nature of your reality, but must also help you discover it in personal terms. In the end, if these books have no effect other than to cause you to reassess your beliefs, concepts, knowledge, and attitudes, regardless of what the outcome of that assessment is, my effort will have been worthwhile. Have at it. Good luck on your journey. May you find value of lasting significance. Point 18 In the mysticism beginning, causality and beginnings are always difficult. Wherever one starts, there is always the question what was before that. This question comes from our sense of objective causality that everything must be preceded by its cause. Must everything have a cause? If no, then one leaps immediately to invoking mystical beginnings. If yes, then the beginning is a logical impossibility. There can, by definition, be no beginning if everything must have a cause. By the logic of causality, beginnings are illogical. The logic of causality requires because we do exist the initial existence from which we are derived to erupt spontaneously from nothing. Clearly, the notion of objective causality must violate its own logic in order to get started. The other alternative, there is no beginning, existence is somehow infinite and perpetual, is itself a mystical assertion that comes from nowhere and goes nowhere. Such an unbounded mysticism offers its supporters no possibility of either answers or clues. Beginning with a premise that our ignorance of beginnings is total and perpetual is not a particularly clever way to begin an analysis of beginnings. Easy perhaps, but not useful. This logical alternative provides a trivial solution that leaves no foundation upon which to build a reality. Thus, the logical result of invoking an objective causality is a mystical beginning. Likewise, the logical result of denying an objective causality, our beginning began without prior cause, is also a mystical beginning. Although the logic of our objective causality would seem to indicate that our beginning must be mystical, that is not necessarily so. It depends on the reality in which such a beginning is taking place, and the reality from which we are viewing it. Causality is system-specific. The logic of causality, the logic of PMR physics for example, holds within a given causal system. The logic of causality only requires that a given system's beginning appears to be mystical from a point of view that lies within that system. The logic of causality can say nothing about the beginnings of its own system because those beginnings lie outside that system, beyond the reach of its own causal logic. Beginnings belong to the next higher level of causality and are beyond the purview or scope of a subsystem's own causal logic. Imagine a hierarchy of causal systems, each being a subset of the next. Thus, mysticism may be removed from our own beginning if we can obtain the perspective of the superset to which we belong. I am not saying that our objective causality should be tossed out. The logic of our objective causality has been, and remains, the philosophical foundation of our science. It has motivated us to ask, how does this work? Or what caused that? It has led to the technology and understanding that is now begging us to take the next step beyond the purely material. I am not putting down the logic of our objective causality. I am a scientist, I live and work by it. I am simply putting it into the proper perspective. I am pointing out its logical limitations, the boundary of its meaningful application, the fact that it requires its beginning to violate its own logic. Thus our beginning, from the point of view of our objective causality, must be indefinable, or equivalently, mystical. If you do not logically equate indefinable with mystical, that is fine. Given that the subject is the creation of our reality, our beginnings, the terms necessarily undefined and unknowable quickly morph into mystical in the minds of many. Thus I use the word mystical to generally describe the unknowable. By the time you reach the end of this trilogy, the veil of mysticism will be logically removed from our beginnings and you will clearly understand the roots of our existence and how and why those roots came into being. Once we realize the causal logic that gives us science also limits our understanding of the larger reality and its beginning, we are free to begin exploring the larger truth. Without this realization, our perspective and capacity to understand is trapped in a conceptual prison, a belief trap of our own making. The erroneous belief in a universal causality as opposed to a local causality is used repetitively to make those who would dare rationally tackle the questions of beginnings appear to be ignorant and incorrect. The repeatedly and iteratively asked question, what was before that? Inevitably must end with a confession of complete ignorance existing at the foundation of an otherwise rational discourse. The position is taken that logical arguments built upon a foundation of ignorance are highly suspect and can be dispensed with immediately as foolish or unsubstantiated conjecture. Our physical space-time causality is local and simply does not apply to what was before that, otherwise we would either be stuck with no beginning, or we would have spontaneously popped out of nothing. Either of those alternatives lead to mystical beliefs that are not scientifically or logically productive, neither makes good sense, nor provides a rational foundation from which to build a scientific big-picture theory of everything. A major paradigm shift described within this section provides another alternative necessarily mystical from the PMR point of view that is not belief-based, that does make good sense, and that is scientifically and logically productive. Our beginnings appear mystical to us because of the limitations of our logic and because of the limitations that our belief-based perspectives impose upon our minds. If you raise science, as well as your vision and understanding, to the next higher level of causality, to the super system that contains PMR as a subsystem, the ever-present mysticism will recede to the outer edges of your newly acquired knowledge. If your picture worldview or understanding of reality is significantly bigger than your neighbor's picture, your neighbor may see you as a mystic. Indeed, you will always appear to be a mystic from a viewpoint that is greatly limited in its understanding, regardless of how rational, complete, or scientific your understanding is. A mystic appears to be animated by unknowable interactions that lie beyond rational understanding. Perhaps your dog thinks that you are a powerful irrational mystic. If your neighbor also finds you to be a particularly good, loving, wise, productive, successful, and capable person, he should try to understand what you seem to understand. If, on the other hand, you appear arrogant, condescending, manipulating, or begin proselytizing and asking for donations, he would do well to keep his door locked and avoid you. The quality of your being expresses the correctness of your understanding. Think about that a moment. What does the quality of your being say about the correctness of your understanding? 19. Beware of the belief trap. Most of us are awash with beliefs of all sorts. We are steeped in the common sense and prevailing wisdom of our culture, traditions, communities, profession, family, and friends. Because belief is very personal for each of us, I will approach this discussion of belief and knowledge from many different directions. Hopefully, at least one of these approaches will connect with your unique experience, intellect, and inner self. When encountering something complex and unfamiliar, repetition is usually required before we feel comfortable with it. Likewise, reiteration is often needed to punch through deeply held and ingrained ways of thinking and being. Most of us have deeply held and ingrained ways of thinking and being, whether we are intellectually aware of them or not. What is deeply ingrained in us is nearly impossible for us to notice. It becomes part of the invisible inner core of our being. It is a fact that subtle belief systems circumscribe our personal reality. It is also a fact that most of our beliefs lie beyond the easy reach of our intellects. Outside our awareness, they literally define, and thus also limit, what we allow ourselves to perceive and interpret as reality. I am sure that you can process big picture information intellectually without difficulty. However, because your core beliefs are profoundly ingrained, it is far more difficult for you to successfully integrate that information into deeper levels of understanding. Because you find certain material to be intellectually easy to understand or conceptually obvious and repetitious, does not necessarily indicate that the significance of that material has actually sunk into deeper levels of knowing. What passes for intellectual understanding is often shallow and incomplete because we have no means to accurately assess the extent of our ignorance. The logical result of an awareness of our ignorance relative to some very important issue is an uncomfortable anxiety, the anxiety of not knowing what you desperately need to know. We generally feel compelled to produce an apparently solid assessment of the problem regardless of how much we know or do not know. In order to ensure that our assessment appears solid enough to significantly reduce the fear-based anxiety brought on by our ignorance, we make assumptions about the degree, quality, and completeness of our knowledge that invariably lead us to interpret shallow and incomplete as sufficient and conclusive. The resultant intellectual judgment, regardless how ill-conceived, will always produce a conclusion that appears to its creator to be reasonably certain as well as obviously correct. Presto chango. The discomforting anxiety disappears as pseudo-knowledge is manufactured by the ego to deny ignorance its due. Do you see how the fear of not knowing thus assuages itself by creating a believable self-satisfying story that provides an alternative to acknowledging and accepting ignorance? That the story may be false is invisible to its author because it is based upon assumptions and beliefs designed to meet the author's pressing needs for reassurance and security. Have you ever wondered how other people can come to the strangest conclusions about all manner of things? From religious fanatics to your sometimes exasperating manager or significant other, it works the same way. Be careful that your intellect does not trick you into believing comfortable and seductive conclusions that are primarily designed to reduce your anxiety, reassure your ego, and maintain your current self-satisfying worldview. Whenever you feel reasonably certain that you are obviously correct even though you have no real data to back it up, you should at least consider the possibility that you may be stuck in a belief trap of your own creation. Only open-minded skepticism will allow you to assess that possibility. Big truth must be understood deeply to be effectively applied. Wisdom resides more in the heart and soul than in the intellect. Your intellect can only take you so far in your exploration of big truth. It can direct your search but cannot cause you to learn anything of deeper significance. On the other hand, your intellect can cause you to squander every opportunity to know big truth. To focus our discussion of belief traps, let me give you a more precise and clear understanding of what I mean when I use the words belief and knowledge. Beliefs may be cultural, religious, scientific, or personal. Belief is generated and necessitated by ignorance. If you know for sure, belief is not required. In that case, you have real knowledge. Knowledge is derived from knowing what is true. If your apparent knowledge is false, you only believe that you know. In this situation, belief is masquerading as knowledge. Belief posing as knowledge is pseudo-knowledge, not real knowledge. Because many are now wondering how you can tell pseudo-knowledge from knowledge, I think a short aside is in order. Throughout this trilogy, you will find discussions of how to discriminate between the wise and the foolish, between the real and the apparent, between falsehood and truth, between knowledge and pseudo-knowledge belief. We will approach this issue from several directions over the course of sections 2 through 6. This is a pudding thing and a science thing. The proof of the pudding is in the eating implies that truth and knowledge can be evaluated by the objective results of their application. Science is the primary tool and process that enables you to avoid belief traps while assessing objective results. Typically, it boils down to the fact that you need personal experience, knowledge must be applied, and measurable results. You must taste the pudding to become a discriminating connoisseur of reality. If you are not careful, you can be deluded about the results, as well as the experience. That is why you must be a good scientist in your explorations. Being a good scientist requires only that you have the right approach and attitude. No degree or formal scientific training is required. You must wait until you have collected enough high-quality evidential data before converting potential possibilities into actualities or knowledge. These potential possibilities, with their associated probability of being true, must always be reassessed and recalculated as new data come in. Apparent knowledge remains potential and tentative truth is absolute. Your list of potential possibilities will, for a very long time, if not always, be a much longer list than your list of absolute truths. If you are careful to remain simultaneously open-minded and skeptical, you will be unlikely to inadvertently make a major investment in false knowledge. On the other hand, you might pursue a hypothesis or potential possibility to a dead end or to the conclusion that your hypothesis is wrong. That is how good science works. There is no way to guarantee that your hypotheses will be proved correct. Proving a hypothesis wrong also produces useful information. Always remain skeptical and open-minded so that you won't wander too far down too many blind alleys. It is those who abandon the open-minded skepticism of the scientist, in pursuit of easy and quick answers, who end up leaping into belief traps. They lose their way and unwisely invest their time and energy moving in non-optimal, unproductive directions based on pseudo-knowledge. The truth is not delicate, it will stand up to vigorous testing. However, you must be careful that your tests are valid. This is not as easy as it first appears. The inherent difficulty scientists have in validating concepts and results reflects a standard problem of science. By definition, it is always difficult for you to design tests to evaluate something that you do not understand. Exploring NPMR is in many ways the same as exploring PMR. Research in NPMR requires, more often than not, a long, slow, sometimes frustrating and tedious process to find tentative new knowledge. There, as with serious research anywhere, dogged perseverance, careful analysis and steady effort yields results better and more surely than any other method. If you repeat your questions about how to separate knowledge from pseudo-knowledge while at the same time pretending that you are talking about the knowledge of PMR instead of the knowledge of NPMR, most of the same obvious answers will apply. Science is science, in both PMR and NPMR. Scientific methodology has the same difficulties and attributes in both places. The primary difference is that in NPMR, as viewed from PMR, science is a personal or subjective activity with objective results. This contrasts with PMR as viewed from PMR, where science is a directly shareable objective activity that likewise produces objective results. For the record, NPMR science, as viewed from NPMR, is also a directly shareable objective activity that produces objective results. This discussion will be continued in much greater detail, and from several different perspectives, at other places within the My Big Toe trilogy. In this aside, I simply want to point out there is no magic formula or shortcut for finding and assessing truth. Believing what I say, or what anyone else says about NPMR or the nature of reality is tantamount to jumping to conclusions without doing the science or investigative work oneself. Belief is not a shortcut that will actually take you to a significant destination. Believing what others say is a risky business. You must discover truth and knowledge for yourself, or it will not be your truth or your knowledge. Your truth and knowledge lives deeply and vibrantly within your being, while someone else's truth and knowledge can penetrate no deeper than your intellect. Listening to others may greatly improve the efficiency of your journey, or send you off to wander aimlessly. In either case, you must make the trip and experience, assess, and validate the reality you find. I do not wish to imply that you must accomplish everything by yourself. Including others on your journey to a greater understanding is generally a good idea. Interacting with others, if wisely chosen, can help you develop a broader perspective and provide much-needed encouragement as well as guidance and direction. But others cannot learn and grow for you. You must do that for yourself. Wisdom, maturity, and the capacity to love are all personal attributes that dwell within the core of your being. Some may be wondering how you go about collecting, evaluating, validating, and applying data in thought space, or how you can experience the reality of NPMR. These are good questions. I am talking about the subjective experiential data you gather while you carefully explore the realm of interactive consciousness within inner space. I am also talking about clear, objective, evidential results. At the boundary, where NPMR activities influence and modify PMR activities and vice versa, evidential data can be collected easily. At this boundary, being aware in NPMR is somewhat like participating in a narrowly focused mental activity, somewhat like a totally absorbing interactive daydream that has a strong causal evidential connection with PMR and a dynamic existence that is independent of you and your conscious or unconscious mental processes. Your mind must be calm, clear, and steady without unruly chatter or noise, or you cannot differentiate between what your mind creates and what exists independently of your mind. That is why finding and learning to exist and operate within the calm, unperturbed center of your consciousness is always the first step. To a clear, low-noise, operative consciousness, collecting data in NPMR will be like moving through an unusually clear daydream. An exploring consciousness should initially busy itself doing experiments and looking for evidence of NPMR activity creating effects in PMR and vice versa. One day, after enough hard evidence is gathered through personal experience, it will become clear that NPMR is both independent of you and causally connected to PMR. Realizing that fact will be your first, biggest, and most amazing discovery. I still clearly recall my feelings of incredulous amazement when Dennis and I first began sharing identical simultaneous experiences while exploring NPMR. See Chapter 10 of this book. After consistently verifying the accuracy of remote viewing experiments and experiencing firsthand the efficacy of dramatically affecting the health of a physical body with a focused mind, my reality was forced to broaden. As the paranormal becomes normal, one has no rational or logical option other than to seek a bigger picture that contains the whole of one's carefully evaluated evidential experience. You can always assume that other people are lying or confused, but when your own experience, consistently and on demand, carries you to a logically and scientifically inescapable conclusion, the truth of that experience will demand a larger and deeper understanding of the reality within which you exist. Simply labeling the paranormal as something experienced by the delusional, the diabolical, the weird, and the wacky will no longer provide an easy way out of dealing with the existence of a reality that flies in the face of your deepest beliefs and assumptions. When the experience is yours, and the processes used to gain and evaluate that experience have been careful and scientific, you must deal with the objective facts of what you have discovered. Denying them is to cling to ignorance and limitation out of habit, insecurity, and fear. To deny such experience is to give up difficult knowledge for the comfort of a mindless dogma. Allowing ignorance and fear to define the possibilities eliminates opportunities for growth and squanders potential. That this is true is obvious when applied to others whose ignorance and disadvantage we understand, and nearly impossible to see in ourselves. After the collection of evidential data NPMR-PMR psi effects becomes routine, one generally moves on to determine the culture, laws, and physics of NPMR by careful experimentation and observation of cause and effect. Imagine that you are an alien scientist from another dimension teleported to Earth to learn what the Earth and its life forms are like. Exploring NPMR is like that, but without the limitation of a needy physical body. Let us take a short break to define the word psi. Psi is a familiar term among parapsychologists and others who are engaged in studying and exploring the capabilities of mind. Psi events generally refer to unusual artifacts of consciousness, specifically to paranormal events associated with mental abilities or altered states of consciousness. Psi is often used as a synonym for parapsychological, thus the term psi phenomena refers to measurable physical phenomena that are produced by some characteristic or ability of mind that is presently beyond traditional scientific explanation. For example, telepathic communication, precognition, and remote viewing are a few commonly experienced and researched psi events. The terms psi energy and psi forces are often used to imply some unknown theoretical causal mechanism that is assumed to lie behind psi phenomena. Because I exhort you at every turn to collect your own experience data, I suppose that I should tell you how to go about accomplishing that task. To this end, in Chapter 23 of this book, we will discuss techniques that you can use to reduce the mental noise, gain mastery and control of your mental energy, and begin exploring NPMR and the inner space of consciousness. However, before we get to that, it is imperative that you first discover how your beliefs limit your reality and learn to appreciate the difference between your knowledge and pseudo-knowledge. Otherwise, your attempt to explore NPMR could end up exploring nothing more than your own ego. Exploring your own ego might be a productive first step if it leads to a better understanding, and thus dissolution, of the fear and belief systems that limit your natural potential, but it is not at all the same as exploring NPMR, a reality that exists independently of your belief systems and personal mind. There is a natural and necessary order to any developmental growth. Skipping steps almost always leads to frustration and blocks, not to rapid advancement. You must first deal successfully with your fear and limiting belief systems before you can productively explore NPMR. Conquering all fear is not required, far from it, but some minimum threshold of competence in managing your consciousness is a prerequisite. The required basic competence is usually developed through meditation, courage, and an energetic dedication to the discovery of truth. The underlying principles and mechanics of meditation are discussed in Chapter 23 of this book. Though there are many ways to meditate successfully, fear can only be overcome by courage and determination. I do not have a special weird science that can help you cut corners and find truth in giant leaps of intuition. Discovery and science are all about making steady progress by taking one small tentative step after another, all the while tasting the pudding, checking the evidence, and producing objective measurable results. There are, as far as I know, no wormholes that let one tunnel through to enlightenment, or signposts clearly defining the best route for each individual to take. The choice of path and the effort applied must be the result of your own volition. Think deeply about how the material in this chapter applies to you. Though it may get intellectually repetitive, this discussion of belief, fear, and knowledge represents a crucial step that must be assimilated at a level much deeper than the intellect. It is as difficult to overemphasize the subject of fear, knowledge, and belief, as it is easy to speed through it intellectually without digging in too deeply. The concepts themselves are deceivingly simple, and thus, repetition quickly becomes tedious. However, their implications for each and every individual are extremely difficult to grasp fully. What fears lurk deeply hidden that push me this way, and pull me that way, like a small boat on an angry ocean? What beliefs limit my reality? What can I do about them? These are difficult and complex personal questions that many egos are all too eager to sidestep. Typically, those who most need to answer these questions are also most likely to zip by without taking much notice. As these folks skim over the surface, they may find this chapter to be as tedious and annoying as a parental lecture. On the other hand, those who have little difficulty in this area will eagerly review the issues once again because they understand the importance, are not discomforted by the process, and do not fear the results. They too may notice the intended repetition, but will use it to improve their mastery rather than suffer through it. Everyone understands the terms cultural belief and religious belief, but some may be wondering what is meant by scientific belief and personal belief. Scientific belief is the belief that the larger reality and all truth must be solely defined by, and limited to, objective, repeatable on demand, consistent, PMR hard science measurements. This is the narrow view of the scientific method cast as an exclusive PMR-only dogma. Though this belief holds true and is wonderfully productive for a certain subset of reality, it does not hold in a bigger picture that contains consciousness, much as classical mechanics fails in a bigger picture that contains very high velocities, which requires relativistic mechanics, and very small sizes, which requires quantum mechanics. Personal belief encompasses all those things you believe about yourself and other people, places, or things, your apparent reality extrapolated beyond your certain knowledge. Personal beliefs, if not correct, are often distorted by hope, fear, guilt, need, desire, misinformation, and misunderstanding. Personal beliefs contain many personalized versions of your cultural beliefs as well. Many are derived from the beliefs of your parents, peers, and associates. Cultural beliefs represent those beliefs that you assume true because everybody around you assumes they are true. Racism, for example, is an expression of a cultural belief. Belief in a universal objective physical causality, or beliefs that conclude that telepathy, mental or faith healing, psychokinesis, or precognition are all totally impossible, are also culturally derived. Religious belief, on the other hand, is a belief in the creed, dogma, and articles of faith of some organized religion. Scientific belief is like religious belief. It is a belief in the creed. PMR causality rules all, dogma only PMR exists, and articles of faith the subjective contains no fact, only opinion of objective Western science. This discussion about belief traps is relevant to all belief: religious, scientific, personal, cultural, political, economic, and any other category you might conjure up. These categories of belief do not have distinct boundaries and, in many instances, overlap greatly. Some people associate belief primarily with religion and are unaware of the pervasive and significant role that belief plays outside the typical religious context. Neither I nor my big toe is particularly picking on religious belief. It is the characteristics and properties of belief itself, rather than any particular type of belief, which is being scrutinized in this chapter. Sorting knowledge from belief is the function of science, both objective and subjective science. Knowing the difference between knowledge and belief relevant to any particular piece of subjective information is called wisdom. Knowing the difference between knowledge and belief relevant to any particular piece of objective information is to know the facts. Many feel compelled to either believe or disbelieve all information they come in contact with and quickly pass a judgment on everything accordingly. Such a process leaves little room and little time for actual knowledge and shows no particular interest in truth. For these individuals, pseudo-knowledge is good enough, especially if it also happens to reduce anxiety and be widely accepted. This approach to information is unfortunate and produces a tendency to jump to conclusions based upon erroneous feel-good assumptions. The result of understanding, appreciating, and accepting the limits of your knowledge is that you neither believe nor disbelieve much of the information that initially lies beyond your knowledge. Judgment should be suspended until sufficient data are collected. That method of approaching information is called open-minded. The quality rigor of the conditions and processes that define sufficient is dependent upon how scientific your exploration is. Good science produces actual knowledge, whereas bad science produces only pseudo-knowledge. Knowledge, ignorance, truth, falsehood, good science, bad science, wisdom, foolishness, fact, fiction, open-mindedness, and closed-mindedness almost always exist simultaneously in differing proportions as they pertain to developing as in creating this trilogy or evaluating what you think of this trilogy, any piece or set of information. Rarely are knowledge and science perfect and pure. It is more a matter of degree and proportion. Perhaps all public thoughts, ideas, and published papers need to be clearly marked by the Federal Knowledge and Belief Administration. This concept contains 80 knowledge, 20 belief. An amusing thought with frightening overtones. Obviously, the only valid assessment is yours, and you must make it as correctly as possible. The quality of your mind and being hangs in the balance. You should not depend on experts, professionals, or anyone else to distinguish knowledge from belief for you, even if you trust them more than you trust yourself and are willing to believe what they say. Conversely, you can only discriminate between belief and knowledge for yourself, not for others. Think about it. How do you discriminate actual truth tellers from those who only believe they are telling the truth? Hint: comparing their beliefs to your own is not the answer. You should take responsibility for separating belief from knowledge for yourself and only for yourself, because you will reap the rewards of being correct or suffer the consequences of being wrong. Herd instincts going along with others who are themselves simply going along with others are counterproductive. There is no safety in numbers with regard to discovering big truth. Failing with the majority provides no consolation, because all successes or failures are personal. No one can drag you along to success by thinking or experiencing for you. On the other hand, you may allow others to retard your progress by not thinking for yourself. It is true that to trust and assume the truth is often necessary at a mundane level and can be a useful shortcut in a world of ideas where we are time and experience limited. Nevertheless, you must be careful not to inadvertently absorb limitations on your mind's ability to expand or modify what you initially trust to be the truth. Be forever watchful for, and open to, new data. Do not block out or creatively reinterpret information that conflicts with your beliefs or what you desire or need the truth to be. Good science starts with honesty, and honesty is most easily applied in an ego-free and fear-free environment. Belief is created when one who lacks scientifically evaluated knowledge puts faith in the premise that things actually are as he or she supposes them to be. Dogma is a fixed set of beliefs that must be accepted on faith in order to join the ranks of the believers who share that particular dogma. Dogma can be cultural, religious, scientific, or personal. It is an integral part of any category of belief. Knowledge that appears to be scientifically or objectively evaluated to a given individual may actually be incorrect. This is because we are not omniscient, our knowledge and data are limited, and because we each create our personal reality, objective and subjective, by interpreting our experience. Belief and knowledge can be either false incorrect or true correct. Both in either state of correctness can strongly motivate action. If you are presented with new information, new ideas, or new concepts that you think may possibly have merit, it is far better to maintain open-minded skepticism while collecting your data on the subject, even if it takes a lifetime, than to jump to conclusions based on some previously held belief or by adding a new belief. Hold on to all the possibilities, old and new, until you have produced the knowledge that correctly evaluates the issues by means of direct experience. The important thing is you need to get out there and collect the data. Laziness or fear of incompetence on this issue produces high-risk results and dramatically reduces the possibility of significant gain or progress. The proof of correctness of any piece of knowledge lies only in the results its application produces. That is true of any knowledge, objective or subjective, offered up from any source about anything, including any astute cerebral gems that you may find in this Big Toe trilogy. If knowledge cannot be applied, or its application produces no practical results, that knowledge is, by definition, useless and irrelevant. Before drawing your sword of truth and hacking away at pseudo-knowledge, let me remind you of something. If you cannot productively apply a particular piece of knowledge or a new concept, then that knowledge or concept may be pseudo-knowledge, or you may be ignorant and basing your evaluation of that knowledge or concept upon belief or pseudo-knowledge. For advice on how to deal with this logical dilemma, reread the aside at the beginning of this chapter. Results can be objective, subjective, complex, obvious, abstract, or concrete, but they must be real, actual results. They must eventually produce objectively measurable effects or changes by interacting with something that is real. Knowledge is only as significant as its effects. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. You will hear more about how to apply this results-oriented truth-testing concept in sections 3 and 5. For now, it is enough to understand that tasting the pudding refers to testing the value of your experience, truth, or knowledge by evaluating the objective measurable results it produces. If what you consider to be truth cannot honestly produce objective measurable results, then remove it from the truth bin and put it back into the interesting possibilities bin. Continue collecting pertinent data and always maintain high scientific standards when evaluating results. If the results are not clear and obvious to yourself and others, you are either shooting blanks or playing with a toy gun. You should always keep in mind that results need to be measurable and meaningful. Here, meaningful includes advancing your personal development, increasing the quality of your evolving consciousness, and improving the correctness and depth of your understanding. Most of us are thoroughly dominated by beliefs, most of which lie outside of our intellectual awareness. How should we go about re-examining our beliefs? The proof of correctness of any belief lies in first removing the ignorance that necessitated the belief in the first place and replacing it with knowledge or open-minded skepticism. Whenever sufficient knowledge has been accumulated to support logical scientific conclusions, apply that knowledge and observe the result. If the ignorance that defines the belief and upon which the necessity for the belief is based cannot be replaced by testable or, using our pudding metaphor, tastable knowledge, then the belief simply remains a belief and its falseness and correctness remain unproven. No intelligent comment can be made either way, and you should remain skeptical as well as open-minded until enough data are collected to provide testable knowledge. Beyond the edge of your knowledge and the outer boundary of your 3D PMR understanding lies your personal unknown. Some of the potential knowledge that remains unknown to you may appear to be beyond the theoretical reach of your knowing mystical, and some may appear to be only a lack of information. In either case, you can leave the unknown alone, ignore it and accept it as the forever unknown, or you can probe it and explore it with the intent of eventually converting at least some of it into knowledge. Most people do a little bit of both, typically choosing a small part of the comfortable unknown to explore using objectivity and belief as tools and ignoring the rest. They pick the low-hanging fruit and convince themselves that anything that isn't relatively easy to reach isn't worth the effort or the social risk. Using subjective experience tightly coupled with objective results is not often explored because it is more difficult and because it is an individual rather than group experience. Those who cannot take a step without the reassurance of others are frightened away. These individuals erroneously believe that what remains naturally mystical to them is forever beyond their reach. The companion belief is that what remains naturally mystical to them is forever beyond anyone's reach. This soothing belief is manufactured to absolve themselves of the responsibility of mustering the courage and making the commitment to do the hard work required to turn the unknown into knowledge. Because of its absolving nature of this belief, it is held most passionately and is a great closer of minds. Another serious error is to intellectually and emotionally deal with that naturally existing what lies beyond your knowing mysticism by assuming a dogmatic set of beliefs. Dogma and belief are straitjackets on the mind, blindfolds to the awareness, limitations on the thoughts you are capable of thinking and the understanding you can obtain. Dogma creates a small, usually incomplete, and distorted perspective that cannot be expanded beyond the confines of the belief. Let us look at disbelief for a moment. Disbelief typically represents a negative reaction to a competitive belief. Whether you believe something is true, or believe it is not true, you are using belief to smooth the discomfort of ignorance. Whether believing or disbelieving, the ignorance is shared. It is only the jump to conclusions that are different. Most vocal non-believers and close-minded skeptics are as wrapped up in their beliefs as those they ridicule or disagree with. The main difference is that they are more apt to deny that their beliefs are beliefs. The more you are committed to your belief, the more that belief appears to be knowledge and represents absolute truth. Pseudo-knowledge can be passionately held if it meets a powerful need or stems from a powerful fear. The relationship linking need, the discomfort of ignorance and fear, and the faux salve of ego is established in Section 3. The statement, "I know that what you believe is untrue," most often expresses a conflict of differing beliefs and pseudo-knowledge, not a statement of truth. How can you tell which is which? Here is how most people tell. If someone else is saying those words, "I know that what you believe is untrue," to us, they obviously are suffering from delusionary pseudo-knowledge. On the other hand, if we are saying those words to someone else, it is again they who are obviously confusing pseudo-knowledge with knowledge. This is an easy rule to remember. If others agree with you, they possess real knowledge, but if they disagree with you, they are afflicted with delusion and pseudo-knowledge. If you want to stay in the mainstream and play it safe in the center of the well-beaten path, applying the above rule is the standard technique for discriminating real knowledge from pseudo-knowledge. What rule could be more simple or satisfying to apply? Other people are always the idiots. The fact is, disagreement on big-picture concepts is most often the result of a conflict of beliefs regardless of who is talking, pretending to listen, agreeing, or disagreeing. If you are to avoid jumping to conclusions in the absence of knowledge, you must maintain the state of open-minded skepticism. There is no other reasonable or logical alternative. Anything else is a trap. By now, you may be wondering if there is such a thing as good belief. I can best answer that question with another question. Is there such a thing as good ignorance? Is there any situation where ignorance is better, more valuable, than knowledge? If there is, then wherever and whenever ignorance is best, that is where you will find a good belief. In the short term and in the little picture, you might find some advantages to ignorance in a few special cases. Ignorance is perhaps not so bad if the problem is of little significance and of minimal importance, or one you can do nothing about. If you are trying to trick, use, or manipulate others to your advantage, their ignorance is always very helpful. In the long run and in the big picture, if you are not trying to manipulate others and your ego is small, ignorance has little to no value. If the issues are significant, the stakes high, or the outcome important to you, then ignorance and belief will leave you vulnerable and looking like an ostrich with its head in the sand. In substantive matters of long-term significance, there is no good belief. The main use and function of belief or pseudo-knowledge is to deny the existence of ignorance, sugarcoat fear, and to manipulate others. Knowledge, on the other hand, provides you with the opportunity to optimize your given potential in any situation. A head in the sand may make you feel better in the near term, but it prevents you from going anywhere actually helpful or productive, and it lets your you-know-what stick out unprotected. If what you happen to believe is big truth, you will be saved by the good luck of being born into the correct culture. A correct culture would necessarily, by definition, be composed almost entirely of impeccably wise individuals of stellar quality. Does that description resemble the culture in which you are immersed? Because the quality of your being expresses the correctness of your understanding, it is easy to determine if you and the members of your culture or subculture, including those who share your religion, profession, association, gang, or neighborhood, are enlightened. Simply taste the pudding. Look at the people around you. Look at the average people in your culture and look at yourself. If you primarily see goodness, wisdom, wholeness, and love everywhere, then your belief system needs no further adjustments and you are spared growing the quality of your consciousness in order to appear grown. If that is, by some unfortunate circumstance, not your situation, or if you are more interested in actually being grown than in appearing to be grown, then temporarily suspend any limiting beliefs, that is to say all beliefs, at least long enough to ponder a few big thoughts. If you succeed, you will have greatly raised the probability that you will figure out how to improve the quality of your being. Don't worry, these unusual concepts cannot stretch your mind beyond its elastic limit. Your mind has an almost unlimited capacity to take in, as well as shut out, new information and new relationships between pieces of information. Some individuals believe that their belief systems are perfect, that their only problem is an imperfect implementation of those beliefs. No way. You are who you are. You absolutely reflect your actual beliefs completely and accurately. The quality of your being necessarily reflects the quality, the correctness, of your beliefs and understanding. Perhaps you don't know what your actual beliefs are, the real ones, not the intellectual ones you talk about. That is normal enough. Cultural, religious, scientific, and personal beliefs can be extremely subtle and are often invisible to the individuals and to the members of the group that share them. Religious, personal, and cultural truths are typically so ingrained and so obvious that they appear to define reality itself and thus are never called into question. Therein lies a major limitation of belief. When you believe that you have the right answers, there is no need to continue to seek truth or ask questions. People who continually question the obvious truth are annoying to those of us who know the answers. If we could only find an effective technique for re-educating the problem people who don't understand the real truth as we do, the planet would be a much better and safer place for everyone and everything. Gentle and kind terminations of the blatantly uneducable would clearly be justified and would go a long way toward making our world a better place for our children and future generations. We could ensure a continuing bright future for all by finally and effectively neutralizing the most undesirable and negative elements that are the root cause of all the trouble. God is counting on us to manifest His will. We will be the heroes of all future generations. Are you with me, comrade? If you found this book laying on top of the john in a public restroom or abandoned in an empty subway seat and opened it to this page, the previous paragraph was meant to be sarcastic. I have attempted to use a little generic religio-politico-historical humor to make a deadly serious point about the siren song sung to one's ego and fears the bait, and the uncompromising iron jaws peer pressure of the belief trap and the debilitating effect it can have on the common sense of someone else. If ego, I must be right, my needs, opinions and beliefs define the truth, fear of the unknown, being wrong, disapproval, imperfection, failure, God, or of the unholy enemy, and peer pressure, this is the way everybody else thinks, therefore it must be right, or at least safe, have influence or veto power over what thoughts you can honestly and seriously entertain, then you are caught in one or more belief traps even if you don't want to terminate those degenerates who are screwing it up for the rest of us. On the other hand, if one actually thinks it is a good idea to terminate the unredeemable degenerates among us, then such an individual is not only caught in a belief trap, but is potentially dangerous as well. Violent or forceful interdiction as a solution to a problem almost always produces the opposite of the effect intended. It usually makes the original problem much worse while greatly reducing the credibility of the forceful individual's viewpoint. Unfortunately, the wisdom and intended meaning of the ancient sages necessarily seem obscure from the viewpoint of those who share neither their culture nor their experience. Additionally, such wisdom and meaning are easily lost and twisted by the belief systems that others quickly establish around these individuals in order to express their ideas at the lowest and widest level of understanding. Furthermore, the self-serving concept of holier than thou often dilutes the significance of such knowledge further as a movement or ideology forms to codify and extend what is essentially an individual quality of understanding and being to a more marketable group certification. No group, regardless of how small or large, can possibly create and bestow experience-based understanding, integrity, and personal growth, the basis of wisdom, upon an individual. The individual must accomplish that. However, there are some things that groups and organizations can create and bestow: power, influence, wealth, and prestige come immediately to mind. These attributes, delegated primarily to the group's leadership, are created by recruiting and maintaining large numbers of members or supporters. The group's members find mutual support, approval, status, political power, and security. The power of numbers is so compelling that groups spring up and are organized around every conceivable interest or idea that can support a viable membership. Large groups, movements, and organizations, from science to religion to professional societies to politics, often end up being about ego, power, money, prestige, and influence, regardless of what their original intentions were. Guilt, fear, intimidation, tradition, security, acceptance, identity, shared values, socialization, and acculturation become the tools of choice to grow, maintain, and strengthen the organization and its power. In contrast, it is the personal science, philosophy, and quality of the individual that must supply the fire at the creative core of human existence. Only the individual can bring content, direction, quality, and value to the power of numbers. Though my big toe is about science, philosophy, and the general organization and mechanics of reality, it is simultaneously about you, the individual. You are a vitally important element of the big picture because your individual consciousness plays a key role at the core of reality. 20 Causality in every dimension can potentially transform a mystic into a scientist from inner space. Scientists often believe that everything must have an objective cause. This, as it turns out, is not a fair or reasonable expectation. It stretches the concept of RPMR causality beyond the bounded intellectual or logical region to which it applies. A more limited statement is everything that we can objectively understand from our PMR base of knowledge must have a cause. We can clearly agree with that one, fully understanding the limitations implied by objectively understand from our PMR base of knowledge, which is based upon measurements made exclusively within PMR. From this viewpoint, it is only those things that we can assess from our limited PMR perspective that logically must have accessible causes. What is beyond PMR may seem mystical to us and can, within the causality of its own dimension, logically violate our 3D objective causality, resulting in measurable PMR effects that we often label as paranormal. Paranormal essentially means acausal, beyond the normal cause and effect relationships defined by our limited PMR physical science. Once the limitations of PMR science are surmounted, what was once defined as paranormal becomes a normal part of a larger scientific understanding that answers to a higher, more general level of causality. Does the concept of beyond PMR seem strange, unscientific, and reek of non-provable goofiness? If it does, you are probably in the majority. The assumption that nothing exists beyond PMR is a normal, self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating, illogical belief. I intend to examine this belief thoroughly over the next 4 sections of my big toe and provide a rational alternative that more fully, accurately, and consistently explains the available measured data. The unfolding of something as unusual and complex as this toe must necessarily be slow and methodical. For this reason, it may be a while yet before you can begin to see the big picture come into focus. If you can maintain an attitude of open-minded skepticism until the end of Section 6, you will be in an excellent position to apply your own personal data and specific knowledge to verify the value of this model and develop accurate conclusions. Unfortunately, the paradigm-busting and rebuilding process must necessarily introduce concepts that seem dubious and are initially incredibly difficult to fathom. It can appear no other way. Normal events and interactions within NPMR must take place within the constraints of a uniform causality. There is well-defined action and reaction. Similar processes must consistently produce similar results for all experimenters. The major difference between the causality that is local to and defines science in NPMR and the causality that is local to and defines science in PMR is that within NPMR the range of possible causes is far less restricted. PMR and its causality is a subset of NPMR and its causality. The rules that govern NPMR physics and the interactions between NPMR beings are of a higher order, more general, less restrictive. Thus, NPMR can interact with PMR in ways that violate PMR's causality. Such an interaction may produce paranormal activity from the viewpoint of PMR, yet maintain NPMR's own causality. Stepping up a level, beyond NPMR also has its own unique causality and answers to a yet higher order of less restrictive rules. Similarly, beyond NPMR can interact with NPMR in ways that violate NPMR's causality, but maintain beyond NPMR's causality. And so on and so forth, as each larger dimension of existence supports, and is a superset of, the next one down. Eventually we will come to understand that whether a reality appears to be physical or non-physical is relative to the observer. The property of being physical or non-physical is simply the result of one's perspective and has no real significance of its own. For the time being, the concepts of PMR and NPMR provide a useful conceptualization of the larger reality from the perspective of a PMR resident who has experienced no other reality save the physical one in which he or she is now reading this book. From our viewpoint, PMR appears to be the final downhill stop for this intercausal reality train unless one counts the fictional Flatland as the next dimensional stop below us. The book Flatland, by E. A. Abbott, provides a wonderful understanding of the scientific, philosophic, and social difficulties involved in perceiving higher dimensions. Anyone can easily understand the limitations of the dimensions that exist below their normal perspective. At the same time, looking upstream reveals nothing but mystical confusion. Though Flatland deals only with geometric or spatial dimensions, the difficulties encountered in perceiving and understanding a dimensionality that is different from one's native perceptual construct are much the same. The second revised edition of the book Flatland was published in 1884 by E. A. Abbott and is currently available from Princeton University Press. The book describes, in a light-hearted and humorous manner, the fundamental technical, epistemological, social, and political difficulty in expanding your awareness of reality beyond the dimensionality of your physical perceptions. If you have not yet read this book, I strongly urge you to do so. It will help you understand how the apparent logic of your reality and the analytic quality of your thinking process is limited by the dimensionality you believe you live in, and it is a hoot. Flatland, in its entirety, can be accessed online at http://www.geometry.uiuc.edu. Bancroft Flatland. Perhaps beyond NPMR is the outermost layer, or perhaps beyond NPMR is outermost. I will describe and discuss both in great detail later, as well as explain what dimensionality actually is and how it is generated. Hold on to these thoughts. We will pick this discussion back up and continue to peel the reality onion after we have more thoroughly developed the conceptual foundation required to support the construction of a big toe. Though I have not yet explained the origins and nature of dimensionality, it is not too early to discuss a few of its properties relative to causal hierarchies or reality subsystems. We see that beginnings belong to, and are governed by, the rules of causality of the next higher dimension. Each dimension of existence births and nurtures the child dimensions it spawns. A child can but is not required to become a parent. One parent can birth many children. Each child exists within their own dimension. Dimensionality is like your family tree, it has the property of breadth as well as depth. However, in this discussion we are only looking at depth, the creational hierarchy. From the perspective of the child, its birth beginning must appear mystical. To the parent, the process and circumstances of the child's birth are well understood and not the slightest bit mystical. From the viewpoint of the child's own local objective causal system, the child's reality logically requires a mystical beginning. In other words, any system of objective causality is insulated from other causal systems by the local logic through which it defines itself. Reality subsystems, each with their own local causality, can be likened to the software components and subroutines of a large complex simulation, all run interdependently within the same computer as long as they have self-consistent rule sets to define their internal and external interactions. There may be relationships and interactions between causal systems, but comprehension and understanding normally flows in only one direction, from the superset to the subset. The subset does not have what it takes to understand the superset. To understand the superset, one must first become a member of it. If you have read Flatland, it will be clear that the ordinary residents of a given reality can only observe and understand interactions within their own reality and the interactions of residents of realities that are more highly constrained than their own. Residents of a more constrained reality cannot comprehend a less constrained reality because it lies beyond the limits of their normal perception. Each dimension of reality has its own rules that define its objective science. Additionally, each dimension of reality experiences the next higher, less limited dimension as subjective and mystical. Consequently, your mysticism may be another science. It depends on how big a picture you live and work in and the degree to which constraints limit your perception. The perspective from the next higher dimension provides a bigger picture with a more complete understanding. This more comprehensive, complete, and less restrictive knowledge is only accessible to lower dimensional beings, those with a more constrained awareness through the experience of their individual locally subjective mind. Consequently, a mystic could be a scientist from a higher dimension, or a delusional fool hopelessly caught in a distorted web of belief. How do you know which is which? A good question. We will go through the differentiating process in great detail in Section 3, especially Chapter 14, Book 2. First, read Flatland to help you appreciate the problem of understanding higher dimensions. Second, carefully and scientifically gather your experience as you progress, step by step, along your path toward increasing the quality and capability of your mind, consciousness, or being. Then simply taste the pudding to separate the wise from the foolish. If you can't tell a high-quality consciousness that is wise and loving from one that is not, you have uneducated taste buds and cannot correctly interpret your experience. Repeat step 2 as often as necessary. To some extent, it takes one to know one, and you may need to evolve your consciousness before you get good at discrimination. The notion of local realities within separate dimensions and of a hierarchy of dimensional existences is probably a difficult concept to grasp. Have patience, the seed has been planted, and later we will learn where these dimensions come from, what they mean, how they are created, and what love, wisdom, and physics could possibly have to do with any of it. Point 21. Cultural bias. Objective causality is the fundamental philosophical underpinning of PMR science. It has been extremely useful to us in understanding and manipulating the material realm. Unfortunately, we PMR beings of limited comprehension have become so committed to our belief in a physical objective causality that we force everything into the PMR causality straitjacket. Why do I love you? Why do I enjoy music? Why do fractal images look like natural landscapes? Why am I obsessed with frogs? There must be some good reason that falls within the PMR causality model. Even if there is no cause within PMR, my feelings and behavior simply erupted spontaneously, mystically, or from some interaction or association with a larger reality that constitutes a superset of PMR. Reasons will be hypothesized and rationalized in order to make our PMR causal model appear inviolate. No doubt some unknown neurological or psychological function or dysfunction explains all but the fractals. Invoking the unknown to serve as a logical explanation for some difficult-to-understand event is not logical or even particularly rational in most circumstances. We routinely adjust our interpretation of events and our scientific theories to satisfy the dogmatic requirements of our beliefs. Theories that violate our cultural and scientific beliefs are preposterous by definition and are not taken seriously by the majority of scientists. Our beliefs set the boundaries and define the limits of our science. They always have, and any reasonably accurate history of science will verify that fact. Most scientists, from prehistory to the present day, feel that though belief obviously blinded their forebears, it does not seriously inhibit their own clear vision. As time passes, the belief blindness of those who came before appears more and more ridiculous, yet current belief blindness remains as invisible as ever. If you think that we of the modern world, we who have come so far in our understanding and knowledge, are no longer seriously and dramatically limited by our beliefs, you are mistaken. Major conceptual breakthroughs in science and philosophy must always lie outside the solution space defined by what is generally accepted. If you wish to leap ahead, be prepared to transcend your present notions of reality and possibility and to rip old limiting beliefs and paradigms up by the roots. Thinking that you can effectively live and work in the middle ground between bold leaps and dogmatic limitations is no more than a comforting delusion. To get out of the box, you first must step over its edge and act too frightening and intimidating to most box dwellers, who will always find plenty of good reasons why it is actually better to stay safely in the box. It is a mistake to let the fear of going from the frying pan into the fire prevent you from ever getting out of the frying pan. Open-minded skepticism, careful science, and a willingness to work and learn can enable you to get out of the box or frying pan without getting hurt, burnt, or deluded. We believe there are always objective causes for every effect and every event, whether we know what they are or not. Determining what those causes are and discovering their rules is what we call science. Given an effect, if we do not perceive an objective cause, we believe that our science is simply incomplete. Our belief in the supremacy of our local causality will not allow us to consider there might not be an objective local cause, that the effect may have at least one component that lies beyond PMR objectivity. Such an effect would be called paranormal and would appear mystical when viewed from a PMR perspective. This possibility is immediately rejected because it conflicts with our cultural and scientific beliefs about reality. The Western commitment to the universality of our local objective causality is a dogmatic non-negotiable belief attitude which is culturally ingrained at a deep level. As we have seen chapter 18 of this book, this belief requires our reality system to have a mystical beginning. At the same time, the Western cultural and scientific belief in universal objective causality condemns every effort to investigate that mystical beginning as irrational, illogical, and superstitious, an objective catch-22. Science simultaneously logically demands and rationally denies a mystical beginning. The problem is our belief that objective causality is universal, applies to all reality instead of just local to PMR. When one sees the bigger picture and realizes that PMR is a subset of a larger reality, the logical and operational difficulty of our beginnings appearing to be mystical immediately disappears. Now our beginning is simply the result of a more general causality working within the rules of its own science. Better yet, it is amenable to our analysis and open to our understanding if we can gain the perspective of that more general causality. Aha! A solution and a plan to effect that solution begins to emerge from the logical possibilities. In other less technically focused cultures, what appears from the PMR perspective as mystical is not necessarily associated with, or defined as irrational, illogical, or unscientific. However, to most Western ears the phrase, "assume the existence of an apparently infinite absolute unbounded oneness," sounds less credible than the phrase "assume the existence of a spherical chicken." We have shown it to be logical that if there is such a thing as higher, more correct, and complete knowledge that reflects the science of the place of our beginning or beyond, then it must necessarily appear mystical to us. We have also shown that such knowledge is only available to us through the expansion of our perspective into the next higher dimension of existence, where our origins are ordinary, mundane, and well understood. Nevertheless, a material-based Western culture steadfastly labels mystical from the PMR viewpoint thought and experience as unsubstantiated useless blather that is beneath serious consideration because it cannot be understood within the purview of our limited applies to PMR only scientific method. It is a goal of this big toe to take what appears to be mystical and beyond knowing, as seen from the PMR only viewpoint, and, through the use of impeccable logic applied to two reasonable assumptions, turn it into hard science in broad daylight under your watchful and properly skeptical gaze. A more general science is believed not to exist because it cannot be derived from a portion of science that limits itself exclusively to local, physical, objective phenomena. Do you see the logical inconsistency of this cultural belief? Is it clear that the self-referential circular argument that is primarily responsible for closing 20th-century minds to the possibility of a bigger picture is simply the result of being caught in a belief trap? Such belief-based, circular, non-logic posing as obvious truth within Western cultures severely blinds and restricts the growth options of those who are caught in that particular trap. The only remaining logical possibility is that although there must have been a mystical beginning, now for some unknown reason, the substance and intent force behind that mystical event has disappeared, leaving nothing else to exist beyond the local objective measurable reality. Do you find this a plausible, objective explanation, or does it seem more like limited thinking desperately trying to justify its limits? A logical possibility perhaps, but it leads to an irrational conclusion. The intent and the implementing power behind our seemingly mystical origins must represent a source more capable and powerful and more fundamental in its existence in order to give birth to our local reality. Our parent reality must necessarily be operational at a higher, more general level of existence or dimension. It must necessarily represent a superset to which our local physical reality belongs. Assuming that this creative source has somehow disappeared is like the ice cubes in my automatic ice maker bucket believing that the compressor responsible for their freezing must have stopped working years ago. Those delusional ice cubes obviously do not understand the bigger picture. Does it seem likely that this higher level creative force, for unknown reasons, just dried up and blew away, leaving us to exist alone like deserted orphans? That premise assumes we could exist independently from our initiating source. As it turns out, our source is both initiating and sustaining. We cannot exist independently from it any more than our internal organs can exist independently from our body. Does this assumption, the source of our mystical beginning no longer exists, appear to be the result of scientific analysis, or does it seem more like one of those mystical beliefs that are considered credible because they support the accepted individual, cultural, and scientific dogma? Popular pseudo-wisdom says if we, our individual selves, our culture, and our science, with our impressive understanding and knowledge, do not understand it, cannot clearly grasp it, much less measure it, then it must not and cannot exist. Does this appear to you to be a scientific conclusion or the expression of a little picture belief? Coming to the logical and rational conclusion that a larger reality within a bigger picture could possibly exist beyond the confines of our present physical reality defines what I have called open-minded skepticism. Simply allowing this possibility regardless of how remote you might believe it to be, and having the gumption and commitment to explore that possibility honestly and scientifically, is all that is necessary to grow your big toe, a personal big toe that has the ability to accelerate the evolution of your consciousness. I have mentioned the terms personal growth, consciousness evolution, and improving the quality of consciousness several times without defining what they mean. These presently vague terms will be precisely defined after we have more fully developed the conceptual basis required to support their meaning. Should you expect our collective mystical only from the view of PMR origin, which is necessarily initiated and sustained from a higher level of organization and a higher dimensional existence, to be obvious, easy to understand, and just like us? Do our machines, computers, pets, designer viruses, intestinal bacteria, and internal organs have a difficult time understanding human experience and motivation within the context of their existence? They cannot begin to comprehend anything but a shallow one-dimensional sense of us. The knowledge, understanding, and intents that animate our actions and fuel our seemingly awesome power are unfathomable to them. If the understanding of the larger reality that contains our beginning is so difficult and beyond the tools of our objective science, is it any wonder that many people, having seen a fleeting glimpse of big truth derived from their own experience or, more commonly, delivered to them by others, have anthropomorphized all manner of beliefs and gods to fill the void created by ignorance and fear? Deep ignorance and deep fear produces a long and varied list. Sun gods, tree gods, moon gods, fire gods, river gods, war gods, fertility gods, tribal gods, ocean gods, storm gods, animal gods, even booze, sex, and party gods, Bacchus, to mention just a few of the probably thousands of gods people have conjured up for their own needs, in their own image, or in the image of their fear. What else would account for the myriad of false gods that other people believe in? Do you realize that people from every religion of the world will agree with the preceding sentence? Wow! Question: does unanimous agreement from such a contentious group constitute a miracle? Left with a total unknowing of something so fundamental and important as the circumstances of their beginning, the nature of their reality and purpose, we can forgive other people for anthropomorphically projecting what they did know into a plausible to them, at the time answer. That is a typically human, if not rational, response. Unfortunately, it also sets the stage for much mischief, agony, guilt, intolerance, fear, confusion, and violence. Undeniably, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. That is particularly true of knowledge gained from others when the recipients do not have the personal quality to have derived that knowledge on their own, thus guaranteeing that misunderstandings will occur and that it will be impossible for the recipients to make distinctions between knowledge and pseudo-knowledge. In matters of big truth, you cannot teach, much less force, someone to get it. As a teacher, it is better to wait until your students are ready than to push big truth into an apparent position of mystical misconception within their minds. As a student, it is better to wait until you are ready, have grown up enough to understand big truth at a profound level, than to leap headlong into a belief trap, thinking that you have taken a shortcut to knowledge and wisdom. You cannot access understanding and wisdom that is beyond what the quality of your consciousness can naturally support. Every individuated unit of consciousness must develop in its own unique way, powered by the free will that drives its intent. Given an important question in any dear to the heart subject, it seems that humankind, this is true for individuals as well as groups and cultures, vastly prefers any plausible at the time answer, even if it is likely to be wrong, to no answer at all. When knowing seems to be important, the only thing worse than a wrong answer is no answer. It is far easier and more rewarding in the short term to calm anxiety with pseudo-knowledge than to face ignorance with open-minded skepticism. Unfortunately, growth over the long term, which is what is important, is severely stunted by an almost universal preference for the short-term feel-good solution. If faced with no answer to an important question about almost anything, we humans tend to make up an answer that suits our emotional and intellectual needs and then believe in it with a force of conviction that is equal to the power of the original need. That is how we humans are fearful of what we do not know or understand, ill at ease with not knowing, uncomfortable with uncertainty. This is why open-minded skepticism, as an approach to learning and growth, is rarely implemented. Though open-minded skepticism is obviously and logically the most correct, beneficial, and productive approach to evaluating new ideas and experiences, it does not provide the immediate closure and false confidence of a believed-in conclusion, and it requires further work. Jumping to conclusions, particularly if they are widely held and therefore a socially safe short jump, is much easier and immediately more satisfying than doing the long difficult work of honest scientific research. It is these tightly held beliefs, fantasies, and delusions of convenience that drive the day-to-day behavior, dysfunctional and functional, of most of us. There is almost nothing more important to us than our fantasies or beliefs. Beliefs appear to make life easier, less work, and happier, at least in the short run. Without them we must face our ignorance, our uncertainty, our inadequacy, and our fear anything is better than that. The unfortunate fact is that in the long run, from the perspective of the bigger picture, beliefs and fantasies almost always have an effect that is opposite to what is intended. The process of denying a fear generally causes what is feared to manifest in your reality. The richness, importance, and meaningfulness of our subjective existence directly conflicts with the notion that if you cannot measure or physically experience it, it is either non-existent or irrelevant. Likewise, the abundance of reputable scientifically collected data documenting paranormal happenings also flies in the face of our limited reality. Given the accepted scientific facts of wave-particle duality, paradoxical entangled particle pairs that instantaneously communicate, and statistically based material existence, modern physics itself is pushing the notion of our cherished objective reality into the subjective mind space of the experimenter. If you are thinking that subjective and rational are mutually exclusive concepts and wondering what reputable data or modern physics I could possibly be referring to, it might indicate you need to assess your beliefs, spot the traps, open up, look around, and get out of the box more often. Credible information speaking to these issues is out there by the basketful and not difficult to find. Examples of reputable data are available in Mind Reach. Scientists Look at Psychic Ability by Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, Delacorte Press, 1977, and The Conscious Universe: The Scientific Truth of Psychic Phenomena, by Dean I. Radin, HarperCollins, 1997. As far as modern physics goes, an excellent non-mathematical description of the theories of relativity and quantum mechanics written especially for the non-scientist is The Evolution of Physics by Albert Einstein and Leopold Infeld, published by Simon & Schuster in 1961. These are only a few of a large selection of books that you might use as a starting point in broadening your knowledge of the boundary between physics and metaphysics. From these books, you will learn that the material reality that you think you live in is actually much stranger than you ever imagined. You will also gain an appreciation of how little science actually knows about the fundamental characteristics and properties of reality. The one thing that most modern physicists agree on these days is that what we generally take for our local 3D time-ordered causal reality is merely a perceptual illusion. Some 60 years after quantum physics destroyed the widely accepted material foundation of physical reality, what lies behind this persistent perceptual illusion remains as mysterious as ever to a traditional science trapped in the little picture by limiting beliefs. The reality paradigm is shifting under our cultural feet. East and West, North and South, are increasingly exchanging information and inextricably intermingling their cultural and philosophic values as information and communication technologies continue to link and integrate the mind space of our planet. This is an especially propitious time to ponder these issues and to figure out what is real, productive, and non-delusional. It will be important to maintain solidity and balance as the cultural ground shifts and shakes beneath you. It is also important to filter out the truth from the inevitable cacophony of conflicting concepts to which everyone is about to be exposed in the coming cultural implosion, a spin-off of the information computer networking revolution. To achieve the most efficient personal evolution and growth, you must find an optimal synthesis of the available concepts and then add to or customize this information to suit yourself. Having a correct and comprehensive big toe has never been more timely or important to your future growth than it is right now at the dawn of the information age. That some individuals refuse to make any effort to explore subjective truth says something about those individuals and the limiting power of their belief systems. Those who seriously take up the challenge of exploring reality and growing their awareness rarely come home empty-handed. They inevitably find a greater reality beyond objective PMR, and it is almost always worth far more to them than the considerable effort required to access it. Again, the proof of the usefulness and quality of any pudding you cook up is in the tasting, evaluating, experiencing, and sharing the results of that particular batch of pudding. You can start anywhere. Be skeptical, be open-minded, and demand measurable objective results after a reasonable effort. If there are no obvious measurable results, try a different recipe. Assess the results, adjust the recipe, and go make some more, slightly better, pudding. Repeat the cycle continually. Before long, you will be winning prizes at the county fair for the quality of your consciousness. It is important to be aware of how your cultural biases and beliefs can severely limit the scope, breadth, depth, and quality of the thoughts you are able to think, as well as the size of the picture you are able to comprehend. The struggle to reach beyond a belief-limited perspective is usually immensely difficult, and only determined and serious explorers doggedly pursuing the truth down whatever path it takes are likely to be successful. Unfortunately, the belief-limited blindfold we all wear feels so natural and is so obviously correct, deeply ingrained, and widely held that we are not aware of it, and may vehemently deny it exists. A belief that PMR is all there is extremely limiting and makes some very important and interesting questions absolutely impossible to answer without invoking additional limiting belief systems. The argument between science and belief, a more general version of the argument between science and religion, is a self-energizing, endless loop of non-logic bouncing uselessly in endless debate back and forth from one limiting belief system to another. The illogical excesses of each create the rational necessity for the other. These arguments violate the rule of rationality by forming a perpetual wasted motion machine within a logical black hole. Campbell's third law of no motion, otherwise known as the law of inaction-reaction, accurately describes these arguments. For every irrational rationalization there exists an equal but opposite irrational rationalization. Certainly, most religions do not believe that PMR is all there is, and religion, as well as science, is a significant part of our cultural heritage. Nonetheless, the organization and codification of mysticism into various religious doctrines and dogmas is of little value. That we as a culture permit a limited and narrowly focused mysticism, various religious dogmas, to coexist and blend with our scientific dogma serves only to confuse, distort, and restrict our ability to deal with the real issue of consciousness quality. Science and religion, each in their own way, preach the gospel of hope and promise deliverance to the promised land of good and plenty. However, as a general rule, neither provides a significant boost to the inner quality of an individual's life. The quality of your consciousness must grow as an independently evolving entity in the shadow of both. Consciousness quality is a personal achievement that can only be developed by an individual. It is not a group endeavor. It has absolutely nothing to do with creed, dogma, or belief. An individual's quality cannot be increased one single iota by any belief, or by accumulating information about anything, or by doing good deeds that are not properly motivated, or by talking to others or reading books. Again, I seek your indulgence, as horses must remain in front of carts, logical progressions must take the time to develop their logic one step at a time. The concept of consciousness quality and its relationship to spiritual quality will firm up later when it is more precisely described and given a technical definition. In the meantime, let me say this: spiritual growth, personal growth, improving the quality of your consciousness, evolving your being, increasing your capacity to love, and decreasing the entropy of your consciousness are all essentially synonymous and equivalent. Many readers have a good idea or at least think they do about what these terms mean, but there are some who are not at all sure, and some of those are now becoming a little worried. This is as it should be. Properly skeptical minds need logical clarity. Establishing logical scientific connections that interrelate physics, spirituality, consciousness, and love is not as goofy or impossible as it appears. In fact, it is something that a comprehensive big toe must necessarily accomplish. Hang in there with me, these ideas are more logical and rational than you might guess. Do not misunderstand me. I am not denigrating the potential spiritual quality that can be found within religion by individual seekers of truth. When I use the word religion here, I am speaking only of institutionalized dogma or organized religion, which represents how the great majority of people are connected to religion. There are individuals and organizations that flourish outside of this generality, and it is highly likely that you count yourself and your associations to be among them. Is it not a simple fact that other people are usually the ones who don't get it, and that the phrase great majority of people usually does not include you? Do you not find it logically intriguing that the great majority of people feel rather strongly that they cannot be grouped with the great majority of people? We humans are generally as aware of our individuality as we are blind to our conformity that is our nature. The unquestionable truth of the bold sentence above should give other people a logical loophole big enough to squeeze through in order to get back into their personal comfort zone. There are those few who, after subtracting organization, socialization, status, tradition, habit, dogma, creed, ritual, and belief from their religion, still have something left over that is very significant. For these people, religion is a personal spiritual experience that enables them to evolve the quality of their consciousness as effectively as any other spiritual path. That they choose to integrate this honest spiritual experience within some traditional religious setting merely represents the individual path they have chosen. There is no intrinsic benefit or penalty in doing so. All paths have benefits and challenges. Contrary to popular belief, I do not condemn belief and dogma as useless and harmful merely because they are illogical and unnecessary. Much of what we do every day, particularly our habitual activities, is illogical and unnecessary. Inefficiency is not a crime. If it were, we would all be in jail. Condemnation typically flows from arrogance and is not likely to be part of a helpful process, nor is it likely to be a good technique for fostering understanding or improving communication. This trilogy is about being helpful, improving understanding, and reducing ego and arrogance. Be careful not to jump to conclusions. I welcome you to walk your dogma in my neighborhood as long as you clean up after it and keep it under control. Don't let it bite, harass, or intimidate anyone. Make sure it does not dig in our gardens, kill our flowers, bushes, or children, or leave piles of poop in our yards. Finally, do not allow it to terrorize or bully the many vulnerable critters and beings that peacefully live and play in the surrounding environment. If you are a responsible owner of a friendly dogma, you and your dogma are welcome in my neighborhood anytime. It is possible, though exceedingly unusual, for an individual to lose ego and gain consciousness quality in pursuit of a favorite dogma. For most of us, dogma erects barriers on our path to personal growth, distracts us from what is truly important, confuses our sense of what is right and wrong, arbitrarily limits our reality by snagging us in belief traps, and tends to make us more egocentric, arrogant, and self-righteous. We readily embrace dogma because it soothes our fearful ignorance with a comforting salve of easy-to-obtain pseudo-knowledge, and because its downside always falls outside our awareness. However, there are a few who outwardly appear to be in pursuit of dogma because of their habits of ritual and association, yet inwardly they have grown beyond its limitations. For these individuals, the dogma along with any associated ritual becomes a familiar pattern of doing that is similar in function to a meditation mantra. Offering either science or religion to one in dire need as is everyone of internal substance is like giving a starving person a rubber chicken. It looks good and he immediately feels better. Now filled with hope and confidence, he chews and chews and chews but continues to get thinner and thinner all the same. If his preoccupation with, and his belief in, the nutritional value of the rubber chicken prevents him from procuring real food, the situation becomes worse. That some real food may be securely hidden within the rubber chicken only makes the situation more pathetic. He can smell it, but doesn't he know how to get access to it? The hungrier the man gets, the more he becomes fixated on the rubber chicken, and the less capable he is of eventually figuring out the puzzle. He eventually dies of starvation, forever grateful to the great benevolence that provided him the precious gift of hope in the form of a wonderful rubber chicken. We are, it seems, like the citizens of Flatland, two-dimensional imaginary beings who cannot understand the connection between solid geometry and their stomachs. They had to go inside through themselves to begin, what was for them, a mystical and metaphysical journey toward an understanding of the third dimension. We need to make a similar journey to understand the larger reality. They had to transcend their beliefs which were born out of their objective experience within their local reality and limited causal system. We need to do the same. They found the reality of the third dimension through subjective experience combined with careful scientific reasoning, not by dedication to dogma, old or new, religious, cultural, scientific, or personal. We need to do the same. Some things cannot be comprehended from, or conversely, translated to, the perspective with which we beings, seemingly trapped in this physical matter reality, have to work. If this journey to understand reality appears mystical and metaphysical to us, that is an artifact of our perceptual limitations and small space-time perspective, not a condemnation of the realness of our vision. Solid geometry and the third dimension are real even though they exist beyond the comprehension of belief-limited flatlanders stuck in their local objective causality. Our ignorance does not impose limits on the larger reality, only upon our understanding of it. Point 22. The right attitude. Significant personal benefit can be gained simply by developing an explorer's attitude. You must be courageous and open-minded enough to contemplate the unknown and then step into it, experience it to find out for yourself. There is no other way. Your experience, your time, your effort, and your mind compose your only doorway to an understanding that is not belief-based. A belief-based understanding is only slightly better than no understanding at all if, and only if, what you believe turns out serendipitously to be true. Do you think the correct belief system can get you to the finish line without running the race? Unfortunately, it cannot, even if your belief turns out to be true. Some people believe that they do not have the time, energy, or ability to gain consciousness quality on their own. They think that if they find the right religion, organization, book, teacher, guru, or advisor, they can minimize the effort required to develop their personal experience of big truth because the teacher will explain what is true and they will simply believe it. Do you think this strategy will work? No, it cannot. You cannot believe your way into consciousness quality any more than you can believe your way into being a master violinist, sumo wrestler, or the president of your country. There is yet another problem. You obviously must choose whom to believe very wisely. How can you do that without great wisdom of your own? Though knowledge can be passed from person to person, wisdom is derived only through your personal experience and is non-transferable from others. You need to be wise to choose the belief system that can make you appear to be wise so that you do not have to earn wisdom through experience and actually become wise. There are no shortcuts. You must develop the quality of your being through your personal experience. Attaining wisdom, choosing paths to spiritual growth, improving the quality of consciousness, discerning pseudo-knowledge from actual knowledge and discriminating good teachers from bad teachers will all be discussed in more depth in chapters 13 and 14 of Book 2. Your beliefs, cultural, religious, personal, or scientific, are for the most part not relevant to the quality of your consciousness, except that they may retard it by limiting what your mind can think. Evolution is not a matter of passing an exam. It is a matter of how you are, the quality of your being, not what you believe. Beliefs don't often, if ever, translate into quality of being. They are only about using pseudo-knowledge to fill in for unavailable or difficult to obtain real knowledge. You can talk about it, know about it, and believe anything you want to about it for free, but you can't be it without paying the price: extensive diligent experience generated from rigorous dedicated effort. That is true of a pro football player, a brain surgeon, a nuclear physicist, a master carpenter, a sumo wrestler, or a concert violinist as well as a spiritually evolved being. No pain, no gain. There is no free lunch. You either pay the price or forego the benefits. Because the benefit is the growth and evolution of your consciousness, foregoing it would not be a wise choice. Why? Who cares? What is the cost of an opportunity lost? We will discuss that later. Let me say for now that the costs are severe and once incurred cannot be sidestepped, but its effects are reversible. The costs should not be construed as a punishment, they are merely the logical result of not evolving. For those who are wondering what evolution, belief traps, and consciousness quality could possibly have to do with deriving a more comprehensive physics, be patient and the connections will eventually become clear. First we must develop the conceptual landscape more broadly and in more detail before PMR physics can logically be birthed from a more general level of causality. I do not want to leave anyone with the impression that spiritual growth improving the quality and thus decreasing the entropy of your consciousness is like working in a salt mine. Besides being useful, spiritual growth is also thrilling, interesting, rewarding, fun, and joyful. Once begun, it is so exciting an adventure that you will gladly want to put more of your time and energy toward it. It is also practical. Increasing the quality of your consciousness immediately increases the quality of your life. 23 Who ya gonna call? True enough, in matters of evolution there is no free lunch. Nevertheless, contemplating and evaluating the ideas of others can be an immensely helpful aid to your progress, and to your effort to grow the quality of your consciousness. You do not need to figure everything out for yourself. The advice of others can be like having a map to guide your explorations. An incorrect map can send you off on a wild goose chase. You must evaluate the correctness of the map as you go because, before you go, you can only guess and assume your way through a shallow evaluation of any map. A useful map must necessarily be somewhat general, whereas each journey must be individual and personal. Before going on to the wholly new concepts of the next chapter, let us first pull together what we have learned about the origins and consequences of belief and the requirements of personal growth so that those who are so inclined can get started on developing the experience base you will need to construct your personal big toe or, at least, evaluate this one. In the preceding chapter we determined that you must do your own exploring and grow your own wisdom. You cannot progress by letting others do the work. To believe what someone else including me tells you to become a believer is lazy, risky, and amounts to accepting someone else's belief or knowledge in place of your knowledge. Copying the behavior or beliefs of others, or reciting or memorizing their knowledge, cannot produce significant spiritual or personal growth for you. Although some guidance by a fellow explorer may help you better understand your challenges and choices, discovering big truth and increasing the quality of your consciousness is fundamentally an independent individual effort. Talking about it all day and all night with the greatest of gurus won't produce one iota of real progress. Your lasting progress must be the result of your personal effort. Personal growth is most efficiently and effectively the product of good science. This is subjective science or personal science, not to be confused with either organized or personal religion or objective science. Subjective science is the mother of objective science. Real personal science requires real, verifiable, measurable, objective results. Here, the word results, at the most basic level, refers to significant, continuing verifiable progress toward the improvement of the quality of your conscious being, the evolution of mind, the growing up and maturing of spirit. Why? Because that is the nature of the reality we live in. You will see that the physical nature as well as the spiritual nature of our reality is straightforwardly derived from the natural process of consciousness evolution. By the end of the next two sections, science will have logically derived the origins, nature, purpose, and mechanics of both spirituality increasing consciousness quality through evolution and your physical world. You will eventually discover that our reality is fundamentally non-physical from a PMR perspective and is animated and driven by profitability toward states of lower entropy. If your efforts do not produce measurable, significant growth, your personal science is only illusory. The knowledge gained through personal science continually and dramatically modifies itself as it grows and changes. On the other hand, cultural, personal, religious, or scientific belief systems require only a sincere belief in the assumed truth of their associated dogma, doctrine, and creed. A belief system requires faith in the correctness of its beliefs. Because correctness is simply assumed, actual results are not required. Correctness cannot be objectively demonstrated. That is the nature of belief. Mature and stable belief systems, including those generated by cultural, scientific, and religious belief, once in place, do not tend to change. There is a logical disincentive to modify significantly what is, by definition, assumed to be complete and perfect. In contrast, the knowledge gained from mature personal scientific experience is always in continual flux. Open-minded skepticism and continual scientific exploration for new data make sure of that. The search for truth is, by its nature, in a constant state of discovery, refinement, assessment, and reassessment because new data continue to pour in as long as the individual is aware and interested in growth. Honest truth seekers never become know-it-alls. There is always room to improve yourself as well as your knowledge. When you know it all, when you believe that you have all the answers, you have, in fact, lost it all. Nothing remains but a hollow shell. You do not need any particular belief, disbelief, or faith to motivate you to start on this journey. You need only to grasp the possibility of a greater reality of some sort. After that, the desire to discover the truth should be motivation enough. Additionally, if this just perhaps possible larger reality is also potentially very important and significant to your life and being, nothing should hold you back from expending the necessary energy to explore the truth of the matter for yourself. You can and should learn from others to the greatest extent possible, but you must grow yourself. Learning from those who have gone before can speed your progress. However, choosing those that you think you can best learn from is an iterative process that must constantly be re-evaluated in light of your experience and your results. Those who can be most helpful, at any given time of your life, will change as you and your situation changes. Do not get stuck in patterns, habits, or rituals. Do not look to groups or organizations to tell you what to do. Do not fall into belief traps. Have confidence in yourself. You not only can do it yourself, but you must do it yourself eventually, quickly or slowly, easily or with great struggle. We are all constantly evolving our consciousness. Evolution forces choice and change. Remaining the same by choosing the no-action option is not possible. Change cannot be avoided. Change can take place as either positive growth or negative deterioration. The individual choices you make ultimately determine the direction, positive or negative, of your growth. A good teacher provides encouragement, makes the learning experience more intense and more concentrated, and gives the student an opportunity to learn more quickly. Unfortunately, the more you need a good teacher, the less likely you are to be able to tell a good one from a bad one. A good teacher focuses your effort to speed up your progress, a bad one misdirects your efforts and inhibits progress. Always stay skeptical, open-minded and belief-free, and most of all, taste that pudding. Continue to require and evaluate actual measurable results. If 6 months go by with no obvious measurable results, this indicates that you need to buckle down and get serious, or change your approach. Results, 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 results. Actual, clear, unsubtle, measurable results. That is how you must evaluate the efficacy of your process. Intellectual knowledge and intellectual results are not the results I am referring to. These are no substitute for the real results of a growing, changing being. Knowing about it can be interesting and helpful, but it should never be confused with being it. A change in the quality of your being, growth in the quality of your consciousness, evolution of your spirit. These are the results I am talking about, results of the being, not results of the intellect. It is about who you are, not what you know. It is about why you do what you do, not what you say, or what you do. When you start intending, doing, and being differently, you will produce measurable results. The tests you must pass are not written ones. Great factual knowledge cannot help you pass a test of the quality of your being. You are who and what you are, and it shows no matter how good you might be at controlling your behavior with your intellect. Truth is absolute, but how to discover it, and express it within your being, must be personal. Develop your tentative roadmap by applying open-minded skepticism to the experience and conjecture theory of others. Then modify that map as you collect your data. This makes good sense, and offers you the possibility of leveraging the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of others as you define your unique growth path. Adopting a set of beliefs is a comparatively unproductive and risky approach to the evolution of your being and the quality of your consciousness. How do you go about increasing the quality of your consciousness? How do you purposely pursue the evolution of your spirit? If dogma, ritual, and intellectual or emotional group gropes are out, how do you get from here to there on your own? For the scientists who are wondering what consciousness and all this blather about spirituality has to do with physics, let me assure you that I have not lost my focus and that this discussion is directly on the path to a scientifically legitimate, more general theory of physics. However, we are now, and will be for some time, developing the necessary basic concepts required to construct this big toe. Because this is a big toe and not a little toe, a larger perspective supported by several wholly new paradigms must be developed. This process may appear, from time to wander through irrelevant, ridiculous, or far-out ideological territory, but if you can maintain open-minded skepticism through the end of Section 6, you will eventually understand these unusual connections and their significance to science. Because this is science and not theology, let me digress in the following aside on the process of getting from here wherever you happen to be to there an increased quality of consciousness. The journey to higher quality consciousness is more simple and straightforward than you might think. I cannot promise easy and quick, but I can promise easy to do techniques and exercises that are simple and effective. For some it will be as easy as learning to swim, for others progress may come slowly. Nevertheless, all dedicated and courageous explorers can succeed superbly if their desire to do so is sufficient. Because improving the quality of your consciousness spiritual growth is not, and cannot be, an intellectual achievement, it makes little difference how you intellectually approach the initiation of such improvements. How you start or what you do to improve the quality of your consciousness is insignificant compared to the act of starting. Additionally, an improvement in the quality of your being does not automatically flow from any external activity or practice. All you need is the will and the insuppressible drive energy to grow your being, and the path, the process, to do so will appear before you. You are surrounded by opportunity to grow, your optimal path starts from wherever you are. I am talking about changing your being, intent, motivation, and attitude, modifying the quality of your interactions with others. Changes in behavior and action, what you do, are secondary results, not causes, and will follow on their own. Primary changes, when significant, are clear, obvious, and measurable to you and to others. The evolution of consciousness is an extremely difficult concept for the Western mind to grasp because we are exclusively focused on the materially productive fact that right results are the products of right action. Westerners want to know what action they should take to get the results they want. Because they deal almost exclusively with external actions designed to produce external results, they do not appreciate that internal results follow a different logic. What you are presently doing, how you live your life from day to day, is probably good enough as it is. What you need to change or improve is why you are doing it. When the why, the motivation and intent of what you do is right, the what will take care of itself. Improving the why can start anywhere, anytime, because it requires modifying internal variables, not external variables. Nothing must change but you. You can hope and pray for someone else to provide you with enlightenment. Trust me, that won't happen, or you can take the steps to develop and grow it. Do not expect to find shortcuts through the flypaper realms of religious, scientific, or personal dogma, or along the midway of a New Age carnival. You must keep your mind free to change and grow. The right question is, how has the fundamental quality of your being changed? The answer to that question defines the metric of your progress. Self-proclaimed success means nothing. Progress must be demonstrated by clear and obvious results. The answer to how the fundamental quality of your being has changed is either totally obvious to everyone, including yourself, or not much progress has been accumulated. Genuine results are not subtle. You and most other people, given enough time with an individual, have the capability to tell the difference between a wise and loving being and one that is only trying to appear that way. This is not rocket science. It is not difficult to determine if you are making real progress. A significant change in your capacity to love is as subtle as the healing of a badly broken leg. Nobody, including you, could miss noticing the change. Are you like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming car, frozen, unable to take the first step? Because of our cultural belief that we must do something in PMR in order to effect change, even if that change is within our consciousness, most people are effectively paralyzed and cannot take that first step. What should I do? Where should I start? They ask, looking for a prescription or set of clearly directed how-to steps. Improving the quality of your consciousness, energizing spiritual growth, and gaining a big picture perspective are not accomplished by changing what you do, but by changing what you are. Reread the previous sentence at least twice and think about your need for a physical process to develop your consciousness. You are a product of your culture, you cannot help that. Spiritual growth, improving the quality of your consciousness, is about changing your attitude, expanding your awareness, outgrowing your fears, reducing your ego, and improving your capacity to love. To succeed, you must change your intent, and modify your motivation. The problem and the solution is one of being, not one of doing. You can do everything by the book, meditate regularly, be conscientious, try very hard, go through the proper prescribed motions and still make little progress. Going through the motions does nothing if the mind is not open to, and in pursuit of, fundamental internal change. The prospect of fundamental internal change can be very frightening. When change begins to occur, many people run away because they are terrified of the unknown. They are afraid of where the changes may lead, which is often directly into the face of their fear and of not being able to intellectually control the process. They find that shaking the foundation of their being at its deepest level is too unsettling an activity. What if the entire I structure comes tumbling down into ruins? The ego begins to fear its own dissolution and death. Fear and belief cause many well-meaning people to reject fundamental internal change, particularly if their beliefs are incompatible with the required changes. Instead of embracing change and facing fears, many would-be spiritual seekers focus on the external rituals associated with some type of mental or spiritual discipline. They go to church or learn to meditate. Many meditators and a few churchgoers hope to produce measurable external changes and to have cool internal metaphysical experiences. In the West, meditation is a cultural and an individual, rather than a social, activity. Most churchgoers continue their attendance out of social convenience, habit, duty, or cultural expectation, whereas most meditators eventually decide that meditation does not do anything for them, or at least not enough to be worth the effort and time required for a long-term commitment. A few of each group pretend their effort has made them superior. The more honest and objective of the failed meditators give up in frustration or due to a simple lack of interest and soon forget about it. I tried spiritual exercises, and they didn't work for me. Practicing some form of meditation to effect external change, gain paranormal abilities, placate the guilt of doing nothing, or simply because you think you should, is analogous to a carpenter trying to build cabinets while holding the screwdriver and hammer by the wrong ends. All the pieces are there, but the execution is flawed. Make the required internal changes and the measurable external changes will occur on their own. You have to grab the screwdriver and hammer by the wooden end, or you will come to the erroneous conclusion that they are useless tools that only someone else can effectively use. Or, more arrogantly, that nobody could use such stupid tools, that cabinets are a logical impossibility, and that all carpenters are delusional frauds and fools. You must realize that you cannot modify being merely by taking physical action within the local physical reality. Westerners have a particularly difficult time understanding this fact and often feel helpless without a way to compel results from the outside. The opportunity to bold to personal success and freedom by employing a more complete knowledge is lost in a culturally conditioned false commitment to the little picture. Belief traps are bigger problems than most of us think they are. I know, after all that, you still want to know what you should do, how you can best modify your being, and what the most effective techniques are. Let me guess, you feel that you could use a hint, a little help, a little direction to get started. Alright, I give up. To help you get started, here are some things you can do that may lead to opportunities to grow your being. However, it is entirely up to you to recognize, seize, and develop the opportunities that come your way. You already have plenty of opportunities, but let us pretend that by doing what I am going to tell you, more obvious and easier opportunities will appear before you. That will get us started with a hopeful, positive attitude. What is more likely to happen is that by conscientiously working at the following exercises, your perspective will change, enabling you to see opportunities that are now as invisible to you as water is to a fish that lives 2 miles down in the middle of a 4-mile deep ocean. With no light and only a dim awareness, the fish knows nothing of water. Water just is, has always been, and is taken for granted. The fish does not ponder the nature of water, it swims in it. We swim in an ocean of consciousness. We are not aware of the ocean, but only of our local interactions with it. The first and most necessary ingredient is a sincere desire to grow the quality of your consciousness, to evolve your being, to permanently change yourself at a deeply personal level. The second most necessary ingredient is to have the courage to change, the courage to face your fears, to face death and personal destruction, for that is the story your ego will tell and try to get you to believe when it comes whining to you with its tail between its legs, hoping to dissuade you from increasing the quality of your consciousness. Why would your sweet little ego do a mean thing like that? Because the ego's main job is to keep you feeling good by managing various systems of belief that are designed to keep your fears beyond the reach of your intellectual awareness. Increasing the quality of your consciousness requires you to face your fears, overcome them, and dissolve your ego. You should expect the ego to struggle mightily. Ego does not necessarily imply arrogant self-centeredness. Ego comes in an infinite array of expressions. Arrogance is only one. Being timid, unsure, or a worrier are also manifestations of ego. Insecurity and anxiety about that insecurity are common. How each personality expresses that insecurity and anxiety reflects individual quality and style. The strategies that are used to deal with fear, though common at the top level, are uniquely applied to each individual. Great ego reflects great fear, it does not necessarily reflect great arrogance or great pride, though it may reflect both. Self-centered, self-focused, and self-absorbed are 3 of the many possible aspects of ego. Each of these 3 can be directed either inwardly producing timidity or outwardly producing arrogance to create personality traits that appear to be opposite. Courage and determination will grow sufficiently to overcome fear if the intent to succeed is sufficiently strong, steady, and clear. I will more carefully define ego and explain its functions, how it works and achieves its goals in an aside in Chapter 8, Book 2. Go there now if you are seriously confused. The most obvious pathway to the exploration of consciousness is through the exploration of your personal consciousness, a scientific investigation of your subjective experience. Studying consciousness from the outside objectively is like studying biology by looking at pictures of zoo animals. Consciousness is fundamentally individual and personal. Our objective sense of consciousness is derived from the reflection of our personal consciousness from the uniquely curvy surface of a mirror that we call another. Our objective experience of other consciousness is the result of an interaction of our personal consciousness representing one set of possible choices or ways of being with another, which suggests to us new configurations, interactions, and possibilities for our being. We project our awareness of consciousness into other, define the nature of other in terms of ourselves, and thus see only a reflection of ourselves in the mirror of interaction with other. To preserve the symmetry of interaction, we also serve as a uniquely shaped mirror in which others can see themselves reflected in challenging new ways. Within this funhouse hall of interactive mirrors, your consciousness is a singular actor. Opportunities for change arise, choices are made, reality is actualized, and progress or regression in terms of personal growth is achieved. Your conscious awareness defines your personal reality. There are as many different shades and levels of personal reality as there are of personal awareness. Other provides opportunity for the improvement of the quality of your consciousness by accurately reflecting the truth of you. If improved consciousness quality along with personal effectiveness, growth, and power are your goals, approaching consciousness from the inside, from the scientific exploration of inner space, is the only logical approach that delivers results. An approach from the outside will limit you to collecting the facts about the shadow that consciousness projects upon the wall of PMR. We project our personal consciousness onto the field of action of a multiplayer interactive reality game whose point is our individual growth and learning. The experience of consciousness, as well as the evolution of consciousness through choice, is entirely personal. However, an awareness of a larger source consciousness and an understanding of its properties are accessible through scientifically probing and objectively assessing the value and operational characteristics of the subjective experience of personal consciousness. One method of accomplishing an assessment of subjective inner space is through meditation. Learning to meditate is like learning to play a musical instrument. It takes a serious, steady effort before you should expect to make music instead of screeching noises. It takes dedication over a much longer time before you can master the basics of the instrument and play it well. Unfortunately, most people who pick up an instrument and give it a try give up before they ever learn to play it well. So it is with meditation. As mentioned previously, going through the motions, or in this analogy, pretending to play an instrument, regardless of how perfect or impressive the visual external display, produces no significant results. There are many effective paths to personal growth. Meditation is only one. Within the wide range of practices that circumscribe what we have loosely defined as meditation, there are many different types, approaches, and methods. Because it is the easiest, most effective, and universally applicable, a simple mental awareness meditation is the path of choice for most teachers and students who have no dogma to propagate. Within this subset of meditation, there are many differing techniques. The technique you choose is not as important as the application of steady effort, so choose a technique that suits you. Within this genre of meditation, you do not actually have to learn how to meditate, you need only to learn how to stop blocking the meditation state from occurring naturally. Though we are pursuing the dubious subject of what you can do in order to undo what you have inadvertently done, I will help you out here because I know your cultural beliefs force you to begin with a physical process. It will be helpful to your doing and undoing if you understand meditation, its purpose, and how it works. With this understanding, you can custom design your own personal spiritual growth, doing thing a physical and mental process that may lead you toward a higher quality of being. The doing process cannot get you there by itself, but it can serve as the on-ramp. The meditation state that I encourage you to achieve represents a condition of inner attentiveness wherein you become aware of your personal consciousness. This, in time, leads to the awareness that you are a unit of consciousness among many such units. Eventually, you will regain your fundamental identity as a spiritual non-physical entity, as well as understand your relationship, your oneness, with all consciousness. Personal growth is a natural result of meditation. Becoming aware of your consciousness is analogous to that fish becoming aware of water. The fish is aware only of its interaction with water. It experiences water through doing, through action, through its objective causal interactions with water. Yet water has existence and significance in its own right beyond the interactions of that and other fish. To become aware of water, one must differentiate between water and a subset of the properties of water. The fish is aware only of the latter. The fish experiences water only in terms of its limited interactions experience. It experiences variations in current, temperature, salinity, viscosity, and dynamic limitations, but does it actually experience water in a fundamental or broad sense? Is the fish right? Is water nothing more than the sensed variations in its properties? Does water with no variations in its properties cease to exist as water, or does it simply become an invisible background to the fish because the fish can no longer perceive it? To appreciate your and the fish's limitations, imagine the perfect sensory deprivation tank where your local environment disappears because of zero input to your senses. Granted, this is not a perfect analogy, but you get the idea. When you are totally immersed in something, such as cultural belief systems for example, that something often becomes invisible because you cannot differentiate it from the background of your local reality. There is no contrast to bring it to the attention of your senses. Consciousness is like that. Like the fish, we define our consciousness in terms of our doing, in terms of the physical actions it allows us to take. The major attribute of consciousness can be summed up as awareness, yet we and our fish brethren are aware only of what we can physically do with it. How we interact with a subset of its properties. Moreover, we can only interact with that subset of properties that are contrasted enough against the invisible background of primal consciousness for us to notice. We create a foreground of contrasts, relationships, and variations in the fabric of absolute consciousness that we define as representing ourselves. See that cute little wad of wrinkles in the fabric of consciousness? That's me. But you are more than the wrinkles. You are also consciousness, a piece of the whole. Meditation lets us experience the invisible background of consciousness. It lets us notice the water itself, not just variations and contrasts in its local properties relative to an invariant constant. The point of meditation is to enable you to become aware of your consciousness and thereby introduce you to your larger self. Becoming aware of your consciousness at a fundamental level will eventually lead you to see the real you, the complete you, the whole you, the sacred and the soiled fears and all. Without the ego to hide the scary parts by inventing an attention-getting I versus other delusional contrast, it is not always a pretty sight. How does meditation lead you to experience your consciousness? By turning down the contrast, noise, and other activity that makes up the busy foreground, by turning down, and eventually turning off, the cacophony of mental interactions, judgments, and operational processes. To become aware of your consciousness as opposed to being aware of the thoughts that inhabit your consciousness, you must eliminate the obsessive preoccupations most of us have with ego-based self-definition, the contrasts that you use to define yourself against the relatively unchanging, invisible background of your individual consciousness. Meditation is thus an act of not doing. It is an exercise in removing enough of the contrasting clutter of your mind to get a glimpse of the real you. Individual consciousness is a subset of absolute consciousness. You are not only the clutter, the wrinkles, the ego, the thoughts, even if that is how you unwittingly define yourself. You are much more than that. Meditation allows you to discover that fact in a uniquely personal way. That is its purpose: self-discovery, a glimpse of the fundamental reality of which you are an integral part. This discovery is possible for humans because, at least theoretically, our memory capacity and processing capability is somewhat greater and contains less entropy than that of the average fish. The fish will never directly experience or contemplate unvarying water, the fish equivalent to total sensory deprivation, but you can experience the fundamental nature of your consciousness if you truly want to. If your desire to know yourself and to know the truth at the deepest level of your existence is not strong enough to provide the necessary focus, energy, and persistence required to succeed, you are not yet ready to begin that journey. There is no rush and no penalty for not being ready. It is much better to wait until you are ready than to push yourself into a state of self-limiting frustration. Do you see why meditation is almost universally prescribed as the first step, the doorway to understanding and exploring consciousness, as well as to the attainment of spiritual growth? It makes sense that a program to develop your consciousness should naturally start with finding and becoming acquainted with that consciousness. There are other methods, but they apply less universally, are more difficult to learn, and are much more difficult to teach. Meditation will work wonderfully when you are ready. You may first need to work on getting ready by developing an honest desire to grow spiritually and the courage to pursue big truth to its conclusion. You may need to first overcome some of the fear and cultural beliefs to which you have become attached. How does meditation clear out the clutter and reduce the noise level of a mind caught in a self-referential endless loop of obfuscating circular logic? The technique is simple and straightforward. The trappings of ritual, dogma, belief, and physical process are mostly irrelevant. You simply stop the incessant operational, self-referential, contrast-producing chatter of the mind by filling the mind up with something less distracting, less self-focused and less obsessively driven. While the mind is preoccupied with non-operative busy work, you can experience the still center of your being. Eventually, after much practice, you can let go of the mental busy work and explore the larger reality of consciousness from an imperturbable, still, and quiet place that will slowly develop and grow larger at the center of your being. Some traditions call this mental busy work assignment a mantra. Traditionally this is a sound of some sort, but in this big toe we are bound only by science, not tradition. We quickly move to toss belief, dogma, and ritual out of the window and focus, by experimental result, only on the active ingredients of mantra. Science allows the concept of mantra to be generalized to accommodate the various ways we take in and process information through our five senses. Typically, people tend to take in most of their experiential input data through their ears auditory, eyes visual, or sense of touch kinesthetic. Many people absorb information more effectively through one of these avenues of data input than they do through the others. Over the previous decade or so, the popular literature is full of assessments of personality type and characteristics by data input preference. It makes no sense to force everyone down the traditional auditory path. Some people simply do not get it that way. If you are not now successfully meditating, and have no idea where or how to find a suitable technique to do so, I will provide to you, free of charge for this one time only, a mentally calming busy work mantra custom made for your personal mind that is based upon each of the dominant perception types. Simply use the one or combination that seems to work the best for you. For those more heavily into smell and taste than the average humanoid form, I am sure that you can follow the 3 examples given to custom fit a smelly or yummy mantra to suit your individual preferences. After explaining each mantra, I will, against my better judgment, tell you what you can do with them. Oh, no, not like that, I wouldn't be that rude. I understand that your Western mindset needs to begin everything with physical process whether it makes sense or not. Those who seriously want to get started on their spiritual journey, but find themselves caught in the headlights of physical action-reaction causality, will now have something to do. It may or may not help you improve the quality of your consciousness, that depends on you, but it will give the committed doers a place to start. Often that is what is needed, a place to start, a doable approach to the problem of how to modify the quality of your being. This could be the step you need to break free from the mesmerizing glare of those cultural beliefs that reduce, rather than extend, your vision. Try it, you may surprise yourself with some dramatic results. For the audio types, we need a sound that means nothing, is 2 syllables, and ends in a soothing or vibratory sound. Here are a few examples of proven quality. Take your pick or make up one of your own. Ser ring, darum, razing, caun, sarun, and share loom. For a simple multi-syllable repetitive string chant, try alam bar d dum alam baad dum. When the bar and baa regularly interchange themselves effortlessly, you will be well on your way. These are sounds, not words. It is important that they carry no intellectual meaning. The point of this exercise is to quiet your operative intellect so that you can experience consciousness directly by reducing the variations, comparisons, and contrasts that your ego intellect imposes upon consciousness. Feel free to mix and match. Put any of the first syllables in front of any of the second syllables to produce no fewer than 36 unique mantras. For most people, it won't make much difference which sound is used, but if one sound feels more natural than the others, use it. Obsessive-compulsive types should take care not to get wrapped around the axle trying to find the best one. Any will do. Lighten up, do not be intense and serious. Have no expectations. Sit in a comfortable quiet place where you will not be disturbed, close your eyes, and fill your mind with the sound of your chosen mantra. No need to make an actual sound. Focus your attention on the sound. Let the sound fill your mind, think of nothing else. Use whatever devices you need to stay focused on the sound, merely listen to it repeat itself. The repetition may be simple and straightforward or occur in interesting ways, perhaps with complex variations. Eventually, let the sound of the mantra slow to a rhythmic, bland repetition and then slow and smear further into a continuous background sound. If thoughts creep in, gently put them aside and refill your mind with the sound. If intruding thoughts constantly stream into your awareness, give the mantra a more active form. As thoughts disappear, leaving your mind empty, simplify and soften the sound of the mantra. Continue the meditation process uninterrupted for at least 20 minutes, twice a day for 3 months before evaluating the results. If the sound slips away, but no extraneous thoughts appear, let it go and drift in the quiet blankness of your consciousness. You will love it. Visual types need a non-personal visualization that begins with complexity but not detail and ends with simplicity. You may start with a black and white soccer ball, then let the colors change to red and blue, let the ball begin to rotate slowly, let the colors change. Your image should be as clear as a watercolor painting, not as precise as a high-resolution photograph. Switch to a series of simple geometric shapes such as spheres, cubes, circles, triangles, cylinders, rectangles, and lines. Let them rotate slowly. Slowly change their size and colors. Choose one shape and let it change very slowly. Watch your images intently, think of nothing else. Gradually progress your images toward greater simplicity and slower motion. Do not force the images, let them do what they want to as long as they do not disturb your tranquility. Look at your images uncritically and dispassionately, as if you were watching a plot